Viewer discretion is advised.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the New to Wrestling podcast After Dark. This week, girl, this week, and the next couple of weeks, because this
Honestly.
documentary was so long but so juicy. We have so much to talk about. We are talking about the rise and fall of ECW on Peacock. Girl.
Oh my God, yes.
I've been
I was
waiting
waiting
to
to get
this.
to this one. I was
Yes,
waiting for this
literally.
one.
Been waiting for this one because from all the little tidbits I've gotten of ECW, just seems like it's my flavor. Just seems like I would love that.
No,
And
I get it.
Xavier literally said to me last week when we were discussing, he's like, I feel like if ECW was for anyone, it's going to be for you.
Was I right? Was I off the mark?
The way I would inject ECW directly into my veins to feel something is crazy.
Yo, you are not incorrect. Not at all.
This was so amazing. So the documentary itself is just about 3 hours long.
Yeah.
So we are going to break it up into, I'm assuming, about 3 parts.
Right.
So tonight will just be part 1, mainly getting into the main meat of how ECW got started, got its legs, the wrestlers, we're going to talk about some of these gimmicks, some of the angles they did. Girl, this read like one of the best soap operas I've ever seen in my life, and I only saw a little bit.
I love it.
A little bit.
I love it. I love the way this
it.
documentary went. I love that it was told, like, you really got like the sense of all of the characters, like, through their feuds.
Yes. And I think the way that it was set up was so good because, one, I just love Paul so much. You can feel how much he cared about the organization and every single wrestler, even if he ended up having a falling out with them or even if whatever, like, he gives everyone their flowers. He gives ECW their flowers, the fans. Like, it just paints such a picture. Like, you really get the whole sense of each of the wrestlers, the whole sense of the organization. And we're only going to get into like the first hour of the documentary. So like where we go from here, I don't even know, but it's crazy.
Yeah.
So let's just dive right in right off the rip. So the main like compilation, first of all, of like what's coming in this documentary, like really tore me up so good. But the very first person, it's like Taz off the rip, which I love. Taz. I love Taz so much. And he's like talking about how like his days at ECW were like some of the best years of his life. And so then we start getting into how Paul came to ECW, which at the time was Eastern Championship Wrestling.
Correct.
So when Paul Heyman came to ECW, a man named Todd Gordon was the owner, and a man named Eddie Gilbert was the booker / matchmaker. But Eddie and Todd have a very bad falling out of sorts. They don't really go into why, but they have a very bad falling out. And Todd turns to Paul because he was Eddie's closest confidant, so he knew like what, the general direction they were going in, whatever, and says like, what do I do here? Because I guess they had a big match coming up, which from our other show, when they joke about ECW and they say like, I mean, your show's in a bingo hall, I thought they were kidding.
No.
Their show was legitimately in a bingo hall.
Yes.
And I love how honest they are about that. I mean, you can't lie about it. It's just the truth. But like, he was like, yeah, we had this big match coming up in the bingo hall, which they like dubbed the ECW arena.
Correct.
Which I love. Again, they're just, if I were to encapsulate, just drop my notebook, but if I were to encapsulate ECW in one word, it would be honest. They're just so honest, or real, maybe. Like, they're just so real. Like, and there's probably gonna be some cursing in this episode, I'm not gonna lie, because there was a lot of cursing in the documentary because Paul, again,
I got you, don't worry. We fix it in post.
There is no bullshitting about anybody in the ECW. They are so honest about what happens, and we'll get into that, like how that becomes like such a trademark of them. But literally, yeah, they're like, yeah, it was in a bingo hall and we had dubbed it the ECW arena. So,
amazing.
On Tuesday nights, your grandmother was playing bingo with her stamp marker, and on Wednesdays or whatever night it was, they were tearing it up ECW. Love to see it.
Literally tearing it up, that's for sure.
And I think that, so when Paul kind of gets the reins, he says, I love this analogy. So he's talking about how he was like, I thought wrestling should go the way that music had gone. In the 80s, you have all these hair bands, you have, White Snake and Motley Crue and Poison and all of these like crazy, like
Mhm.
I said, like 80s hair bands. And then Nirvana comes and bam, like changes the whole industry, like
Right.
the whole music industry. And so he says like wrestling had become the equivalent of hair bands and we needed a Nirvana to come along and shake things up. And so he kind of wanted to take it in that direction. Todd gave him his blessing, was like, do whatever you want to do.
Mhm.
And so on September 18th, 1993, he opened the show with an act called Public Enemy, who was Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge,
Yep.
which are names I'm sure you all know.
Right.
Because even I recognized Johnny Grunge.
Right.
Um, so I was like, wow, that's really crazy. And Paul, I love the way his mind works. I think Taz says that in the opener too, like the way Paul thinks. I think Mick Foley says it too, like he just has one of the greatest minds for wrestling he's ever
Correct.
seen.
And that's fully why he is being inducted into the Hall of Fame this year. So,
Which I cannot wait to see. Like, I really cannot wait to see. I told Xavier, I was like, I have to make sure I like watch that because especially like I've already had so much respect for him. You guys already know that. But after watching this too, I'm like, oh God, like there's just something about him that's so crazy. Like
right.
just so endearing and you just like want him to win so bad.
Oh, he's
And
because he's so passionate about everything. Like
yeah, you can
whatever
tell
he
he
does, he's
cares.
all in. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So it's hard not to like,
buy
yep,
in.
yeah, exactly.
Fully. But Paul says, he saw that they had such great chemistry as opponents, because I guess they used to be Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge were opponents. And he's like,
Mhm.
wouldn't it be cool if they came together as a tag team? I bet they'd have like incredible chemistry.
Mhm.
And somehow it worked. And Taz was like, here come these two white guys rapping and dancing badly and having fun. But once that bell rang, they were two rugged guys from Philly who could fight.
Right.
Which is also, again, the essence of ECW. It's just rugged guys
Correct.
from Philly who can fight, which I'm so here for.
Mhm.
This documentary also made me so proud to be from the East Coast. Like I was
No,
like, this is
literally.
East Coast shit. Let me like this
Mhm.
is East Coast. Like this could, especially like Philly, and I know Philly's a whole other thing, but I was like, there's something about the East Coast. Like they're just
Yeah.
New
For
York, Philly, like all of that. Girl,
yeah,
ain't nothing
my
like it.
my uncle grew up like in Philly during this time, and he like mentions a lot. He's just like, it was just one of those like Philly's just so proud of their sports, like they really make it their own. And
Yeah,
it just became like one more thing that was like in that wheelhouse. That was like, oh, like that's Philly's, like ECW, like that's our like our little engine that could, you know what I
I
mean?
know. And I love that.
Yeah, and we go into like talking about like the Philly crowd and all that craziness in a little bit of the documentary. So, but I just it was a nice thing that my uncle would always mention. Like I remember being like out and about and just like the energy from them was just palpable. Like everyone was just
Mhm.
into it.
I love that. I
Mhm.
mean, you could tell. Like literally in one of the clips they show of Public Enemy, they like smash somebody through two tables. Like it's like a
Mhm.
table on a table, like
Yeah.
smash. And this is like the early 90s. Like I know that
Right.
things like this happen now and like probably happen more in like the Attitude Era and things like that in the later 90s,
Right.
early 2000s, but like
This
for the
is
time, that's
unheard of.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
What
this
they were
is
doing is
literally
wild.
what beyond, just beyond. And again, we'll get into the fact that like it was fully a lot of things were like fully cherry picked from ECW.
Oh, fully. Mhm.
Like a lot. We'll get into that. But so Taz at the time was Tasmaniac.
Mhm.
And he says he knew Paul just from working independence through the Northeast late 80s, early 90s. And Paul had called him and said he had a match for him against a man named Sabu. And Paul's like, you ever heard of him? And Taz is like, yeah, I'd heard of him. And Paul's like, do you guys think you would have a good match? And Taz like, well, I was just so eager to get booked to do literally anything that I was like, yeah, of course. Like, of
Yeah.
course we would have a good match. And he's like,
Right.
I had no idea. Like, I didn't know if this was gonna work. But they meet. Taz goes to Philly. They have one of the most iconic matches
Mhm.
ever. Like it's just insane. I mean, both of these wrestlers just of their own volition are crazy. And so to have
Mhm.
them together, like, and they'd never really worked together before and have this insane wrestling altering match,
Right.
just love to see it.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
after that, Taz ended up working for ECW for 7 years.
Right.
Pretty much right up to the end, I'm assuming.
Pretty close,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So Sabu had developed a reputation at FMW, which was in Japan. And Paul says he was literally mesmerized by him. He was just so crazy. He had all these scars. He had a total disregard for his own well-being and has this look like he will fight you to the death.
Right.
And from our other show, talking about like the little interludes where Sabu comes in, I think we were just talking about this, where it's like Sabu is always like he comes in, flies through the air in some crazy stunt, basically almost kills himself, and then has like taken out.
Right.
And like just the clips of him in matches of ECW, it's like exactly. It's like he just is so crazy, borderline almost dies, but
Hmm.
like you're just so mesmerized by him. Like he's just insane and like again, no regard for his own body. You don't even really know anything about his like him personally. He's just this like entity
Right.
almost,
And I
which
love
is crazy.
what Paul says. He's like, there was somebody I could like put on a poster, and people would be like, "Yo, that's different.
Right.
Like that's not what I was expecting."
I've never seen it. I mean, and literally, if you think of him, he's this insane wrestler. They're in Philly. It's like it's the 90s grunge, whatever. And here he is in these like sparkly pants, but they're like wheeling him in like Hannibal Lecter style.
Fully.
It's like there's so many different things going on, but you just know, like, I've never seen that before. That's so crazy. And I want to see more of it. Like, you're just
Hmm.
so fascinated by it.
Right.
And Paul says like he was literally the main key of developing the aura of ECW, which
Right.
love that Paul used the word aura. But
Yes.
he
Yes.
literally
Yes.
he was like it
No.
like
Yeah. He like encapsulated it. He was a.
yes. I think I love Paul too because he has that East Coast thing where like you talk with your hands and like you really like
Uh huh.
love. Um then we meet Tommy Dreamer, which girl, Tommy Dreamer, the way that he interviews in this
It's fantastic.
fantastic. Which, by the way, this came out in 2004, so long, long time ago. Not,
Hmm.
well, yeah, 20 years ago. But Tommy Dreamer is so, for the most part, deadpan about like everything he talks about, and it's some of the most insane stuff you've ever heard in your life, like what he's getting
Right.
into. And he's just like, yeah, like he's so matter of fact.
Right.
And like, yes, he has moments where he kind of like laughs and you can tell that he like really cares about it, but he just seems like he is like he just has this thing about him where he just seems like a workhorse and he's just like
Hmm.
always like he just loves it so much, but it's like his job. He's like, yeah, it's just my job. So like what we did was like da 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 da.
Right. And I also imagine it's gotta be hard to qualify like which crazy event stands out more from the field
Mm,
of crazy events that was his life for like 10 years.
yo,
So
an
I imagine it's just
understatement.
like, you know what I mean? Like his like adrenaline was just kind of that high for that long, like just for 10 years, just on an adrenaline like kick.
That is a really good point. This is like probably the first time he's come down in years. He's just like,
Yeah, and
okay,
yeah,
so
exactly. Like it's like coming to just like, what did I do?
I mean, it's amazing. So Paul says like, and this clip was crazy. He was like, I mean, he was crazy. He was so innovative. And they show this clip where he would put up a folding chair. He would
Oh
jump from
yeah,
the chair to the top rope and do a moonsault over the top. Like
yeah.
I so easily, no
He's
fear,
crazy. Hmm.
crazy, just crazy. And it's so funny because when we meet him in the other show, and I was like, Tommy Dreamer, like what a stupid name. Like it just sounds I'm sorry
Hmm.
because this man is crazy and incredible. I've never seen anything like that. Like they also talk about there would be no ECW without a man named Terry Funk. And so
Oh, the
Terry
funks.
Funk, what a G. Terry
Hmm.
Funk was the only veteran from that era who had the reputation of being legitimately tough, but also had the business sense to realize that he's got to get the next generation ready.
Hmm.
So I guess like Paul was saying there were a lot of veterans who were unwilling to get young guys ready or train young guys because they just were like, I'm going to be in the top spot forever. Like I'm just like, I'm never going
He's calling
to
that that's your Hogan.
I was just going to say, he's calling out Ric Flair, I'm assuming, Hulk
You're
Hogan,
yep. All of the
all
above.
of those
That
guys.
whole generation, yeah.
But yeah, so Terry Funk just kind of realizes like he has skills that he can impart onto other wrestlers and for there to be a business, for there to be an industry for him to leave behind, he has to actually impart wisdom on the people who are coming up after him. So he would see potential in young wrestlers and literally make them the top. And Paul was like, literally anybody. He would point to some guy and be like, I think I can make him the number one. I think I can make him the number. And he always worked. It always
Hmm.
happened. He was just an amazing coach, an amazing teacher. Um,
Yeah, Terry brought
so
a lot of like legitimacy. Like Terry was like um he's part of like the Funk family, which was huge in wrestling in the like 70s and 80s. And like Terry Funk was like wrestling your Ric Flairs and your Hulk Hogan's and your, you know, like, and but he was really the only one that like understood that like as you kind of like age out of the business, like it doesn't take anything away from what you've like your star power or your time as being like number one to like give back to the business that
yeah,
gave to you. Like
yeah.
there is no, he didn't have any kinds of like ego about that sort of thing, which was a really big departure from what was generally the case at the time.
I love that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he just seemed awesome. And there was basically a three-way match for the title between Shane Douglas, Sabu, and Terry Funk. It was a 1 hour time limit. So basically, like they had 1 hour and that was it. And then
Hmm.
basically the gist is they all fought for the whole hour. Nobody pinned anybody, nobody was
Hmm.
out, literally, and it got like Paul said one of the very first standing ovations at ECW because it was
Hmm.
so crazy. Um, and said it was something really, really special. So Shane Douglas, this is
Amazing.
amazing, amazing. So he's just like, which I love that the very large theme is that like they hate WCW. So Shane Douglas is pissed at WCW, he's pissed at Ric Flair and would say pretty much anything on the mic to vent his frustration with just the industry in
Oh,
general.
yep.
And Tommy Dreamer was like, if you watch early ECW, Paul Heyman was hell bent on taking down WCW. Like
Yeah.
he was livid, girl, because I guess he worked for WCW. They fired him. I think his like direct quote was like, I didn't like them. They didn't like me. I didn't like the way I was treated, and they didn't like the way I treated them back. I pretty much told people to go themselves when they were threatening people or treating people like shit, and I don't think they enjoyed that.
Correct. Which
Which tracks.
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 Just based on the everything else we know about Paul, that yes, Paul is not
Mm.
afraid to speak his mind if he feels like it is necessary.
And I love that
That
about
is for
him.
sure.
And I cannot imagine a man like Paul Heyman working for Eric Bischoff.
Well, so it wasn't not necessarily like that way.
Work for?
Paul was there during like when Bill was it Bill Watts? One of them was kind of the main like producer guy. I think like in the ascent of Eric Bischoff, like I don't know if their paths crossed for too long.
Okay.
Um, I don't think Paul was probably able to work for Eric for very long. If they
Right. He literally says like Tommy Dreamer goes, Paul said that Eric was Satan, like
right.
literally Satan spawn, and if you went to WCW you were basically joining the Taliban.
And if you like just the way that they picked the interviews in this also, it's just hilarious. So
It's
good.
so good. I can't wait to talk like because later Vince McMahon and Eric Bischoff come into it, and it is
Mhm.
so funny to have the three of them have like three completely different perspectives on the
Of what's
same
going on.
situation.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, like Tommy Dreamer says, like Paul painted WCW and Eric Bischoff as the most vile people you could ever work for, and you were joining the Taliban if you went and worked for WCW and Eric
Yes.
Bischoff, which I again, Tommy Dreamer, deadpan, not deadpan, but like very straight faced business. Like he's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, that's just like that was the tea.
That's what
Like
happened. Yeah.
that's what happened. So, and he also says that Paul didn't have any beef with WWE at that time, but he hated WCW.
Right.
Um, and Tommy Dreamer also says he was also employed for the 7 or 8 years, and all he ever wanted to do was wrestle, and he was so grateful that this had given him the opportunity to
Hmm.
do so.
Right.
Love. Next, we meet the Sandman, who we again had previously met in the other show, and I literally was like, this man is
I
so crazy.
I love this because like so for those of you who haven't heard, like on our other show, we got to the point in on Monday Night Raw when ECW does their like 1996, 1997 like invasion. So Kelsey has been like introduced to this cast of characters, but really very briefly. So getting to
Yes.
unpack all of this is so good. So good.
Well, I
So
think that's what was exciting because now it's cool that now I do know stuff, or like when we watch like the behind the scenes documentaries, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that.
right,
Like when we get to In Your House Mind Games, I was like, we watched that. Like I remember
right.
that. Like I
Mhm, mhm.
remember, and yeah, it's true. So now that I know a lot more of the ECW characters, the invasion is so much more thrilling to me because when you're meeting them in the moment, especially when we get to Blue World Order, because I just last week met New World Order.
Right.
So like now it all the pieces are just like my brain. I feel like that woman at the end of it, like really the Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, where like the aliens are like telling her the information and she's like, I feel like that's
Yeah.
me right now.
Oh
Like
my
I'm
God,
just
I
like
love that.
or like when Sheen from Jimmy Neutron like has like the gigantic brain and he's just like floating. Like that's how I feel right now.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's amazing.
I'm
That
just like
literally tickled my
levitating.
brain so much. That was great.
I'm just like levitating on information about
Uh,
wrestling. Just like but
amazing. So the Sandman.
so the
Uh,
Sandman, yes, who's also levitating but not on information, but
Yo,
he
just
becomes
on the thrill.
on adrenaline. He becomes the full embodiment of ECW, and his matches basically become secondary to his entrance, which
Yep.
I'm sure you all know about.
And tracks.
The
Like,
beer, the smashing it on his head to the point where he just bleeds every time, like the entrance through the crowd, and they part literally like the Red Sea. There's just
mhm.
so many flavors to him. And he Paul says he was just a tough guy looking to fight people and everyone loved it.
Right. Ate it up.
I mean, cuz if you think about like the name Sandman, you're assuming like he's knocking people's lights out. He's like but there's also so like there's the cane, there's
There's
the
also just
MC Hammer pants. Like
such a
there's
like average Joe about him. You know what I mean?
yes,
Like you literally he looks like you just like grabbed him from like a construction crew and you were like, get in here. You know what I mean? Like and it just like
fully.
turned into this like phenomena because like he was just so crazy that people were just like so enthralled to watch this man just like bust himself open before he even makes it to the ring. That they were just
Well,
like, oh, this man, they ate it up, ate it up.
that's their boy.
Mhm.
That is their people. I mean, he just he's just so good. But we also really quickly I wrote down like we see little glimpses of Nancy, of woman.
Oh yeah, she came through
She was
also.
there. I was like, first of all, she looked gorgeous. Second, she gets involved in because she's kind of like with the Sandman at this time.
Hmm.
Like in some of the she gets involved in what we're gonna talk about, which is the Singapore cane match. So the Singapore cane match, there was a man named Michael Fay who committed some sort of crime in Singapore. And he was going to get caned as his punishment. And like the US was apparently like flipping out, like, we
Hmm.
can't let this like an American citizen get caned, la 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 la. And Paul was like, work, let's actually let's take this and make it an angle in a match. So they have the Singapore cane match, which is basically a bamboo cane and
Yeah, it's a
like
kendo stick essentially.
which is crazy.
Hmm.
And basically the loser of the match was going to get caned for an
Yep.
indiscriminate number of times. So the loser of the match is Tommy, and Sandman starts to just beat the ever living crap out of his back with a cane. And Tommy just has to stand there, like
And
holding the
take
top
it.
rope and take it. And Tommy's like, no matter how much it hurt, how much I wanted to stay down after getting hit with it, nothing would make me do it. Like I couldn't
Hmm.
do it. The adrenaline was so serious. Like I just could not let him like take me down with the so
Right.
he was just relentlessly beat back, cut open, shredded. And literally goes, fans were literally screaming for me to stay down. Girls were crying in the front row.
Hmm.
Please, like, just stay down, let it stop. And I just kept getting back up. It was so brutal. And he says like ECW, I love this line. ECW preyed on human emotion with a lot of different angles. And
Mhm.
I love that because I feel like ECW lives in the gray area, which
Right.
I really like. Whereas a lot of times in like WWE, sometimes it can be very like black and white, like this is the good guy, this is the bad guy.
Right.
But ECW like worked in all these other like
Yeah.
angles, and I
Yeah.
just love that. And there was this like crazy face off at the end of it where like Tommy Dreamer gets in Sandman's face and is like, what are you gonna do? You gave me your all and I'm still standing. And literally Tommy Dreamer's like, Sandman's lip was quivering because he was getting emotional because he could recognize they were living in like an incredible moment of
Mhm.
wrestling history. And it was like literally he was processing it in real time. And Tommy Dreamer says it was a turning point in my career, but also for ECW, it was like a form of redemption through violence for the
Yeah.
fans.
Mhm. Because they talk about like how like the first couple like hits like they cheer. They're like, "Oh, like yeah." And then like as like it continues, like it just like you feel them like turn from like, "Oh, like this is like a great stipulation for a match." Like, "Oh, wait, I feel bad. Wait, stop. Like actually like this guy's like so tough. What is he doing? Oh my god." You know what I mean? Like you like in that moment like they took the entire audience on this entire like emotional ride of like thinking that that was what they wanted was like to watch this guy get caned, but by the end of it like the redemption of like Dreamer still being like standing on top after is really the payoff, is really the like the moment that you're like looking for,
Just
which
got
is
chills.
interesting.
I mean, it literally is like again, it's this weird thing where it's like it makes you think about yourself where you're like, do I really want vengeance? Like this is the
Mhm.
cost of vengeance. Like it
Right.
just like you said, it plays with your emotions in all these different ways because you're like, yeah, I want to see the man get hit with the cane. And these are some of the most rabid, bloodthirsty fans in all of wrestling. They are, like, without a doubt. And like they're like, wait, no, like
Right.
and to have this so charged, I mean, I can't imagine. I
Mhm,
cannot
mhm,
imagine this
mhm.
feeling. And literally, Tommy Dreamer was like, this was the rush from the fans was the best drug in the world. Like,
Yeah,
it was like life force energy.
love that.
But Paul says like we did a lot of things with Sandman and Tommy Dreamer that broke a lot of taboos. There's this part where Dreamer essentially blinds Sandman. This is so crazy.
Mhm.
So good. Blinds Sandman with a cigarette, then hits him in the other eye with a cane. And it's this like the tearing down of the dressing room wall where like they go backstage. Sandman is like on the ground, like bloody bandages over his
Mhm.
eyes. Someone's holding back Tommy Dreamer while he's screaming like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it to get this far. Like I didn't mean to do it." La la la. Nancy's
Right.
screaming. Like there's all these people, like medical staff, all these
Right.
people freaking out. And it said like you saw the good guys and the bad guys commingling, which was a big no-no at the
Right.
time.
With yeah.
And Tommy Dreamer showing remorse. Like he's like, like I didn't mean for it to get that
Right.
bad, like blah blah blah. Like just so
Normally, if like an angle happened, like that was the angle. Like
that
that
was
that
you just
we
rolled
we
with
all
it.
committed to the bit and that's what it was. And this was like the first time like the audience ever really gets a peek back there because up until this point like really with the exception of like very minor things. Like it's either like an interview backstage, like that's your access to the backstage area, or like the wrestling that's happening in the ring. And
Yeah,
that's all the fans were like exposed to. So this was the first time you really got to see like the areas of the arena that were like untouched by fans and like where the wrestlers are hanging out and like how they actually are. Um which was exciting to fans. But for traditionalists in the wrestling business, it was like, what are you doing? You are literally wrecking the entire formula. Like, this
yep,
is tried and true, what has made us money. And now you're basically just throwing that out the window, which, as we
right,
know, like, is what needed to happen because
fully,
eventually they start writing a new rule book.
yep,
So,
easy,
mhm,
like done. And I think it's so because they're trying to it makes sense and it's so obvious because it's like you're trying to make wrestling like quote unquote real. Like we
Mhm.
know it's a Sun show, there's things that come out like that
Mhm.
are like the outcomes are orchestrated, blah blah blah. But like when you are so strict about like no one seeing what's behind the scenes, no one seeing people in real life like doing whatever, it creates that atmosphere of like these are actors acting in a role. Whereas like when you bring people backstage, it's like these are real people experiencing real shit, like
Right.
real stuff. Like
Mhm.
so it almost works more in that favor of like when you're creating that angle of like you want it to be real,
Mhm.
then it does like isolating it.
Right.
Like
And
the problem becomes the solution. So like or the you know what I mean?
yeah, no, I agree. And it goes along with just like the further like just the philosophy of like ECW where it's like they had to do things like that. Like they couldn't like rely on like big money. Like
Yeah.
they had to just be creative and like break rules that were set in stone. Like they just had to. Like it was the
To
only way
stand
that
out.
they yeah.
Yeah.
It was the only way that they were going to be known. So they did what they
Yeah.
had to do.
And I love that. But like, so that whole thing goes on behind the scenes. And then Paul says, to Sandman's credit, he stayed home for a month.
Right.
Literally did not leave the house, didn't get a package, didn't get the mail, didn't do whatever. He literally stayed in his home for a month. No one knew what had happened to him. Allegedly, he's basically dead. Like, who knows?
Mhm.
And then a month later, he comes out. And so the visual is like, apparently he's coming out to retire because he's blind. He is
Right.
literally blind, won't be able to wrestle again. So he's coming out. Someone is literally walking him. He has like all these bandages on his face. And woman is in the ring, like talking to Tommy Dreamer, like having some sort of, she's like distracting him. And Sandman comes up into the ring behind Tommy, and suddenly he just starts like taking off like the glasses. Then he takes off the bandages, then whatever. And suddenly he just canes the crap out of Tony Dreamer directly to the head.
Oh,
Just
like
bashes his head
oh,
in.
it's a shot to the back of the head. Like
I
you see the cane like splinter
splinter.
from how hard he hit him in the back of the head.
But it's so good though. Like it's
It's
so
so
crazy.
good.
You think this man is blind, and it's like the visual of like Nancy, and then Tommy's looking at her, and you just see Salmon behind him, like slowly take off the glasses, then
Mhm.
slowly take. Oh my god, it's
Amazing.
crazy. And then
Mhm.
he's back. That's his reintroduction back after taking a month off. Like,
Right.
oh,
Sick.
it's just
Sick.
so good. It's
Right.
so good. Because I would be screaming if I was there.
No,
I'd be
absolutely.
freaking out
Please.
without a doubt. So when ECW was first starting, and this is something that is reminiscent of when we were talking about the Monday Night Wars, like the rise of WCW, there's a lot of gimmicks in wrestling. It's geared towards families. There's, we've said it a million times, the clown, the plumber,
Right.
the whoever. But ECW had the 18 to 34 male demographic of testosterone-filled ass-kicking wrestling with hot women, lots of blood, and that was a no-no for WCW and WWE. They like could not get away with it at the time.
Mhm. So
Um,
we just watched like WrestleMania like 13,
mhm,
which had the Bret Hart Stone Cold match like with the, just like tons of like blood. But like if you notice and that there has never been any blood on any episode of Monday Night Raw. Monday
mhm.
Night Raw is on network television. It just hasn't happened yet. Um, so it's a
Because it's
very
been in the pay-per-views,
it's been in the
but that's it. Because
pay-per-views, which doesn't carry the same rating rules and whatnot.
exactly.
So we've seen it in very small like doses in the WWE up to this point, but ECW was like, oh no no no, this is what we do. Like this,
Bloodshed every week.
we're gonna perfect this. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we have like we're starting to really get like really sexualization of women in WCW to the point not where it's just like wow she's good looking, where it's like yeah
Oh
like
yeah,
smoke
yeah, we're
her like a
getting
barbecue, like it's like
right.
really starting like we watched the Slammies also, which I think is next week's episode,
Of
just as like
After
a
Dark,
little yes
correct.
of After Dark, which is just a little like sprinkle for you guys while it's WrestleMania weekend, so you just have a little little flavor.
Right, right, right.
um but there's a like a bathing suit competition in like at the Slammies, which is crazy.
Oh,
And like we had the
just wait until we get to bra and panty matches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Where the entire premise is to strip your opponent down to their bra and panties, and that's how you win.
Okay. It's like both thrilling and terrifying to me to know we have so many more peaks and
Levels.
valleys. It's like
Yes,
so much more to
absolutely.
traverse because it's funny. We were because it's our year anniversary.
Woo!
But we are I was watching some old episodes today and there's like a point there's almost every episode I'm like, I don't know how much more where we can go. Like there's so many like I just don't know where we're going and then every week we're just topped. So like
Right, right. It's
I
amazing. What a time to be a fan.
I'm running out of like feelings to feel. Like I'm just gonna like you're just gonna see me here just smoking cigarettes and being like,
Shaking.
what a week! Like
You're gonna be that Ben Affleck meme, like where he's just
oh she's
smoking
like
outside.
and just be like,
Amazing.
well, the joie de vivre. I don't know, like it's what it's whatever.
Amazing.
But
Amazing.
yeah, so excited to traverse that. That'll be
Right.
exciting. Yeah, but it's just like I mean, there's all these clips at ECW in like 1993 of Nancy Benoit on the beach in a thong bikini, just like living her best life. And I
Oh,
just, I
thriving.
mean, I love to see it. Love to
Mhm.
see it because also the thing is with ECW, the women are like they're not necessarily wrestlers, but my God, they wrestle. Like, and we'll get into
Do they
that. So
take
I
a
don't
beating?
they take
Yes.
a beating and it's crazy. And they had like the male wrestlers have so much respect for them, even though they're also like so sexualized. It's so different than WWE. It's like such
Right.
a so I don't mind it as much because it's like they're sexualized, but they also like they get in the grime. So I
Right.
don't mind it as much, if that makes sense.
No, I agree. I don't know. Yeah. It's like I mean, a delicate balance. It is a delicate balance.
Fully, we know this, but yeah. So I guess like Paul says like WWE didn't care what we were doing, WCW didn't care what we were doing, but everyone was talking. Like everyone was
Hmm.
chirping. Um and I don't remember who said this. I think it was Paul, but you can respect the elders, but then there comes a time where
Yeah.
that era is dead.
Right. And like he
And
named it. And like
yeah,
that's the thing is like people like back then used to just like come after ECW for not like respecting these like old generations and blah 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 blah. But it's like Paul like is a wrestling like guy. He knows his
yeah,
wrestling history. But and like the thing he's just always been intelligent enough to know that like nothing in business can stay the same like forever. Like you have to evolve. You have to change
evolve or
with the
die.
times. Like
Mhm.
he just had the foresight to just be that kind of businessman when a lot of these people who ended up getting like ate up by either WCW or WWE just like were stuck in their ways and that's what ended up happening. All of
Right.
these companies around them are like trying to adjust to the times and they're trying to just do whatever they've been doing and then
Mm,
they get passed by. Um
yeah.
so
And I just think like I know change is hard, but it's also so exciting to do something new
different.
and
Yeah.
like different. Like it's just it's thrilling and it's like even if it doesn't work, like at least you tried something. Like I don't know, I
Right.
can't imagine like I know that again it's obvious, but like if the same formula has been working for X amount of years, like we'll just stick to the formula and hopefully
Right.
we'll rebound or whatever. Like I kind of get the mentality, but also like the proof is in the pudding and like change always excites people like at the end of
Hmm.
the day like
Right.
maybe not initially like maybe people have like a weird reaction to it but at the end of the day like
They
change
had a
always
reaction
like
to it. Right.
they had a reaction to it. It's like you say it all the time where it's like you even if they hate your guts at least they're reacting to you
Right. Hmm.
and that because complacency is a career killer. You always say that. So it's
Right.
like, yeah, I mean, Paul, I mean, literally, Paul E. Dangerously lives up to his name. Like, he just like lived dangerously and like it paid off, like in a lot of
Amen.
ways. But then we meet, well, we don't meet because we already know and love him, but Mick Foley as Cactus Jack. I did not know, only ever known Mick Foley as Mankind in
Right.
WWE. So
Yeah,
this
it
was
was good to get
so
a little.
thrilling.
Yeah. This was his like the character he played before Mankind. It was great. I and like um Cactus Jack will make it, this is not the last time you will see Cactus Jack. I will just give you that little tidbit. So,
Work. Okay,
mhm.
great. Because I actually feel like Cactus Jack really fits him because he's like
Yeah,
prickly and like He just seems
Mhm.
like a rogue, like, you'd find him in the desert, and he's, like,
Right.
living off, like, cactus juice, and I don't even
Mhm.
know. Like, it just
Right,
kind
right.
of, like, fits him. I
Mhm.
I know we say it all the time, but I have nothing but beautiful love and respect for Mick Foley. I just think he's so fascinating.
Yeah,
Um
we should go back and watch some of the like his time in WCW because he had some like excellent feuds with both Vader and Sting, respectively. Like
ooh, would love
great
to see
matches
that.
with both of them.
Would
So
love to see that.
mhm.
So he makes his way to ECW, he says, as kind of a talent exchange. Like WCW, I guess, was like attempting to establish a relationship with ECW somehow.
Right.
And I guess like Mick became sort of a part of that. And he says, Paul and I had worked together at WCW. Oh, or Paul says this about Mick. Sorry. We had worked together at WCW and we always wanted to do more work together. And when we had the opportunity, we jumped on it.
Right.
And those two minds together thrill me. Like
Yes,
the
as it
way
should.
as it should, because they have that same like frenetic fervor, but like single-mindedness of like the mission. Like
Yeah.
there's something about it that's just so
I
like
don't know. You can just tell that they're like I don't know. They're like synergies that like work. You know
yes,
what I
they're just
mean?
like when they're in a
Like they're
room
buzzing
together,
on the
like
same vibration. You know what I mean?
fully, exactly. And so they show this speech that Mick Foley does, because I guess at WCW, he was a tag team title holder,
Mhm.
and he had come over to ECW and lost this match, like, against, I think,
Sabu.
Mikey Whip oh,
Oh, no.
Sabu, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, it was against Sabu
Sabu, because then he teams up with Mikey Whipwreck later
later
on.
on.
But
Yeah, during his, like, actual run with ECW.
yes, yes, yes. So, but Mick Foley does a speech where he, like, has the tag team title belt, and he spits on it and, like, throws it away because he's like, I know you guys think that, like, me leaving this, well, at least I have a title belt, but, like, this," and he spits on it and throws it. He goes, "Well, that literally means nothing to me." But what he was saying is, like, that his pride is worth more. Like,
Right.
the fact that he's leaving a quote
Like a
unquote
loser.
"loser" is worth more to him, especially because he's representing a different organization. So it's
Right.
actually very brilliant, but he says like a lot of people were really offended by it, but he does like a little shade where he goes, if they had actually watched the speech instead of just heard about it,
Right.
they would have understood.
Yeah. But this
Love.
is back in the day when, like, not everything was readily available to rewatch. You know what I
Right, this
mean?
is
So a
true.
lot of stuff got back to people through word of
The
mouth,
grapevine,
hearsay, blah,
yeah.
blah, blah. Yeah.
And like the only thing you're gonna clock is like he spit on the belt, and that's like a big, 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 big no-no.
Right. Exactly.
So, that makes sense, but he goes, "I was told to help these guys out, and I believed I could help them out not only in the ring, but on the mic," because obviously, I mean, we know
He's an excellent, like,
I
promo
mean,
guy.
he did the promo in German that one time, like, let's
Yeah.
not even go there, like, wild.
Mhm,
But
mhm, mhm.
next we talk about Mikey Whipwreck, who we briefly talked about in our ECW crossover episode where, like, Mikey Whipwreck came out and Xavier goes, "No, poor Mikey," and I was like, "Why?" And you're like, "He just gets beat up a lot." But yeah, basically, so he was part of the ring crew. He was only 19 years old. And somehow, like, he was just, they were like, "Yeah, if you can, like, fly around the ring and make the other guys look good, like, yeah, whatever, you can get in the ring." And he would take a bump and he would have such sympathy. And somehow people just started to fall in love with him. And Paul was like, "Would you like to really wrestle?" And he said it would be his dream. So they really trained him up. And the key was, this was so amazing. The
So
key
brilliant.
was they never gave him an offensive maneuver.
Never, never. So
Never.
anything that he got done was either through like a reversal or like a surprise. Like he never had like a move that was like him going on the offensive. Everything he did was either on the defense or like was like a surprise like roll up or a surprise like
I
he
can't.
he just got his butt handed to him week in, week out. And he like the way that he sold it just whipwreck. He looked like he was going through like car crashes. So people just felt for him because it's just like, oh, like this guy like gets his ass kicked every week and he still comes back. He just comes back and he just comes back the next week. And like that's like how do you hate that? How do you hate that man like kid? Like you can't. You just you cannot. It's so good.
You're like, you literally go like, "Oh, Mikey."
I
Like, he's
know.
like your friend's, like, kid brother or something.
Right.
Like, you're just like, "Oh,
Oh,
Mikey."
Mikey.
Like,
Yeah.
Mikey. Like, I know he has, like, a very lovable, like, Italian mother who's like, "Oh, Mikey, come in here." Like, you
Right.
know what I mean? Like, it just
Mhm.
paints a picture, but not giving him an offensive maneuver is so good.
It's brilliant.
So, so good. Can't love.
I love
Um,
the little promo that they do. It's like at one point when Cactus Jack and Mikey Whipwreck like win the tag team titles and they're doing like a promo like backstage and they're like, "Oh, like we're taking on like so and so. Like, you know what that means, Mikey?" And he's just like, "Oh." You know what I mean? He's just like, "It means I'm going to get my ass kicked." Like,
yeah,
yeah,
oh
I was
my
just like, "Oh,
god. You
so
just love
good."
him so much, and, like, when they win, when they become tag team champions, like, Cactus Jack is, like, trying to hold up his hand, like, as they're winners, and he's just like, like,
He's like in pain.
yeah, he's, like, in
Like,
agony, like, he can't even do it. It's just such a good gimmick. Like, I
mhm.
just love it so much. He's Mikey Whipper, he gets whipped and he gets wrecked.
Right,
That's just his
amen.
whole thing, but he's still the tag team champion at some point. Like, it's
No,
just
I know, it's amazing.
10 out of
He
10.
still he gets a win over Steve Austin, like,
Like,
it's amazing, amazing.
it's incredible. Um, so then Paul says, like, we needed to do something that separated us from the old school specifically. So we get into more of Shane Douglas, who is the franchise, which I
Mhm,
also love. Because it's again, it's talking about this thing where it's like you're not an occupation, you're almost like a stereotype or just like an ambiguous idea, like the
mhm,
franchise. I just love
right.
that. Um, so the franchise was their main singles wrestler, and there was a tournament to crown the new NWA World Champion, which is, I guess, the National Wrestling
Wrestling Alliance,
Association,
yes.
Wrestling Alliance. And it took place at the ECW arena, the Bingo Hall
Mhm,
Girl.
right.
Um, and Paul says the NWA was something we wanted to get away from. We wanted to shake everything and everybody up, and Shane Douglas wins the tournament, and he basically tells the old wrestlers to kiss his ass. He's like,
No, he does.
he
Um,
literally does.
so a little bit of, like, the backstory, the NWA. So basically how their like world champions were like chosen was like via like committee, because the National Wrestling Alliance was like the like governing body of all of these like independent wrestling promotions. So they would all
Okay.
get together, all of their like presidents or whatever, decide who they wanted to be the champion to represent that entire organization, quote unquote. And then that champion would go from like location to location and like face like build up people in each of the territories until there was another champion, like it was time like voted on that another champion would like eventually like take over from another territory. So like
Mm,
all of the territories were always like vying to have their guy be the champion because it meant like the most money, the most exposure for their own territory.
right.
So just like a backstory is like how like why they wanted to get away from all of this is like the NWA ends up like falling on hard times like financially, and they kind of like go through it, and that's why he like mentions in his promos like a company that's been dead for like 7 years. So this was like them trying to like reinvigorate that whole brand, and he was just like, why do I want this? Like, I don't want this.
Yeah, we're
Like,
giving like CPR to someone in a coma. Like,
right.
we don't care.
So, so just a little backstory on like what how they used to like decide their like champions. So like so Shane Douglas was like voted upon by like all of them, which is why this like move is such a slap in like the face to them because they literally went out of their way to pick him. Like,
Yeah, and it's crazy because again, it's one of those like corporate committee things where at the end of it, one guy on the board is like, "Well, he's still our champion," because it's like you can't go back on that. Like you guys voted, and you have to like if you want to assert yourself as like a voting governing body, you have to like commit to your bit. So like
right,
even though he did that, you still have to like die on
right.
the hill of no, he's definitely the champion we decided on. So it really puts them in a terrible position, which is great. Like, not
Yeah,
great, but it's, like, great for ECW because it really, like, again, it but
establishes them.
yes, like Paul said, it ushered in the era that we were looking to champion. Um,
Because in that same promo, he denounces the NWA,
yes.
like declares himself the ECW champion, and then also declares that it's now like Extreme Championship Wrestling, like in the same like breath,
Yes.
essentially.
And the crowd starts chanting ECW, as
Yep,
they do.
as they do.
And it's like it's literally, I have chills just thinking about it again, because it really is, it's so, like you said, it's just so layered. There's so many things here, and he really, like, it's just him and the mic. He just went out there on a limb and was like, yeah, ta-da. Like,
Right,
this is what I'm doing now. Extreme Championship Wrestling. I'm the heavyweight champion of ECW, and like that's that.
right. Agreed.
Bye. Yeah, and so Stevie Richards says it was crazy. It was one of the most historic moments ever had, like, he'd ever witnessed. And to see it happen and to see all the fallout with the board president was crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, like, the board president calls him a disgrace, blah blah blah. But Todd Gordon later, like, I think it's like the next day or whenever, says like, as of noon today, I have folded NWA Eastern Championship Wrestling, and in its place will be ECW Extreme Championship Wrestling, and we recognize the franchise Shane Douglas as our heavyweight champion.
Yep.
And
Yep. Yep.
that's
Yep. Yep.
that, girl. That's
They
crazy.
they were really off and running after that.
Yeah, I mean, wild. And so, like the fans that were chanting ECW at the arena when Shane Douglas made this amazing proclamation, they get into why the fans of ECW are so incredible, which I loved. And Paul basically says, like, I don't know if ECW could have been born anywhere but Philadelphia, because Philadelphia has a rabid audience that both WWE and WCW fought for back in the 80s. WWE would run the Spectrum with Hulk Hogan, and NWA would run the Civic Center. So NWA, I guess, was becomes
NWA eventually, yeah.
WCW.
Mhm.
Yeah. At the Civic Center with Ric Flair, and they would do it head to head on the same night. And from the ashes of a wrestling business that had fallen onto its ass in 1993 rose this phoenix of a promotion that people were getting behind, and people could point to and say, that's my hometown promotion.
Right. And I'm telling you, like, so I am in the Philadelphia area and WrestleMania is coming to town like the next week. And just like the energy from wrestling fans, just like around. Like I have
Mm-hmm.
had more wrestling interactions in like the last like week than I've probably had ever. But you can really you can just sense the pride that they take in their wrestling, like in this area.
I
It's
love
great.
that.
Hmm.
And no one can take that from them. And
No,
they would never
absolutely
let
not.
them take it from them anyway.
No,
I
no, no, no,
mean,
no. You would never get a shot
no,
because
no, 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 no.
good
You'd
luck.
be dead.
Right.
But people started coming from all over the place to see ECW, from New York, New Jersey,
Maryland, they
Pittsburgh,
they were
Maryland.
heading
Girl,
down.
everyone was going to ECW. And that's when we get Dean, Eddie, and Chris coming through. So Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, the three amigos come to ECW. And what also really like that, they added the element of just true wrestling. So
Right.
like just bell to bell, straight up wrestling. Like they weren't doing anything like the blood and the
Right.
guts and the gore. They were just doing like straight up wrestling. So it added another layer, and that
Hmm.
just classic wrestling that they were missing. And Eddie says Paul gave us our time to go out there and wrestle, and it just worked. Like they brought that pure
Wrestling style.
ethical wrestling style. It created balance. But then they get into this is great. This kind of gets into like the honesty of
Hmm.
ECW. So Paul's saying like we couldn't compete with the budget that Ted Turner and Vince had. Like so we our like motto at ECW was we highlight the positives and we hide the negatives. So
Yep.
like we can't pay for big lights and we can't pay for pyrotechnics. So screw the lights, screw the pyro. Here it is, down and dirty. Like
Right.
we're gonna lean into the violence. We're gonna lean into the speeches. We're gonna lean into the conflicts, the
Hmm.
props, the
The
gore,
audience
the
participation.
audience participation. Like that's what we're gonna lean into because that's what we have, which I love. Like they're not gonna ever give you something like if they can't afford the lights, they're not gonna give you half-ass lights. It's just like whatever. Like
No
it doesn't
lights.
matter. No
Moving on.
lights, no lights. Bye. Like so Ron Buffon, who I guess is like he's kind of a producer, he ends up being a matchmaker, he does like a lot of different
Mhm.
roles. As we know, a lot of people at ECW do a lot of different roles.
Right.
But he said we left everything in. We made mistakes and we didn't try to hide it. We explained people's injuries. Like they literally did it like football or like baseball where it's like the picture and they're like drawing on the screen like with the arrows. Like so see here when like
Yeah.
Stone Cold like broke his neck like and he
Yeah.
had to like be out for a while or whatever like
Yeah, it's like a picture of like Sabu, and they're like drawing, like they're like, oh, okay, so he landed here, and the force of his body was going this way, so here is the break, and you're like, ah, okay, and which
like
is not every other company was just like they just brushed it out of the under the rug. You know what I mean? Someone gets injured, they like take them away, and then you get an update a couple weeks later with the whatever,
yeah, you
and that
were
was it.
written out of the script. Like
Right,
so and that's just standard. And Ron says like it showed the fans respect that we respected their intelligence, especially when we were talking last week about how Triple H was like we were basically doing all these passe things that insulted people's intelligence and then
right,
here's ECW like yeah, we kind of messed that up, but we're
right.
sorry about that. Like they
And that's
showed
the thing that like makes the all of this is going on at the same time. So at the same time the
yes.
WWE is like insulting people's intelligence, like ECW is giving people like just keeping it real with people. Like
Mhm.
they kind of understood the like business like kind of principle that like if you are just upfront and honest with customers, they will generally forgive you for what it is that has happened. Than if you try and like sweep something under the rug and then they feel like they're getting blindsided by something, which is just, a good business practice.
Period. And
Period.
we've said this because when we were talking about the steroid trials, we were like, Hulk Hogan didn't need to lie about doing the steroids. Like,
Right.
it would have been better if he just came through and was real about it because you
Right.
respect that. We say that all the time, where it's
Right.
like, there's literally no reason to lie because, first of all, your hands are already red. We already know.
Right.
So, like, just be honest. And so I think like that's why it's so good because they showed this like master clip of like people falling, people going to do moves and messing up and like not even playing it off, just being like,
It happened. And like
that
the
was
thing
bad.
they said is like why they were like we didn't hide it because we couldn't hide it. Like they saw it. Like there was no ifs, ands, or buts around it. So like why like do this like song and dance and pretend like there weren't mistakes made. Like it was much more like, honest to just be like, yeah, like that's not an easy thing to do. Like, you know
So
what I mean?
sometimes, yeah,
Sometimes
it
mistakes
goes
happen.
awry.
Like,
Fully,
yeah. So like, and that
fully.
was just like the first time the audience was ever really given that, was really like leveled with in that way.
And I love that. And because of that, it really creates a relationship with the fans to the
Hmm.
wrestlers. So Taz is like, they were extremely interactive. They were so involved. And Jericho's like, it was almost like a cult atmosphere. Like
Right.
they dictated a lot of what they ended up doing
Hmm.
because they were so involved. Bubba Ray Dudley says they are the greatest wrestling fans of all time, the most unique set of fans he's ever wrestled in front of.
Hmm.
Um, which again, like I think about now, like when we were watching these clips and like seeing these people in the audience, and they talk about how like there would be the same people sometimes in the front row. There was hat guy, like he just
Right.
always wore this like straw hat, whatever. I think about those people like now, like where they are now.
Right.
And like they were just a part of something so crazy that they'll like never be able to really explain
Right.
like the feeling of it, but it was just
Being
such a
part of that
moment.
community, because it built a like it was a whole community. Like as much they like really go into it is like they ECW was special in that it made the audience feel like they were a part of the show every time.
Yeah.
And that like their participation was not only like, invited but necessary,
Yeah.
which is a fun place to be as a fan. Like first of all, these are generally like smaller like venues, and so like you already kind of get this like atmosphere of like everybody being like in it's like when you see like a smaller show for like an artist you love that's kind of
Yeah,
like
it's
a bigger artist, but
crazy.
like you're watching them like somewhere small and you all kind of feel like you're sharing this like moment together.
Yeah.
But when you kind of recreate that and then do it like week over week, you get this like sense of like family the same way like you get like the sense of family and like being in a production, um where you know like your cast or your crew like becomes your like little family. So like
Yeah.
it recreated that in a lot of ways, where like people in the area who were like lucky enough to be able to like come consistently to shows felt like they were a contributing member like to the show, like their presence
Yeah.
like mattered.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do when you're like, one, the product you're presenting is not always the most like uh touchy feely, let's like get the fans involved sort of thing. And
Yes.
also like um it's also like there is a dangerous aspect to it, so getting fans involved also is has a liability. So
Yeah.
so you know,
Yeah.
but they like just nobody did it better. And I think it was Taz, that was his like they knew that like when they showed up, they were going to get 3 to 4 hours of entertainment, like,
Yep.
and that's what we gave them every time,
Every
every
time.
time.
Yeah.
And that's how you do it. That's how you build the loyal like fan base. And I think it was Paul who was like we couldn't do the lights or whatever. He's like, what we had though was like the like super rabid, like super knowledgeable like fans. Like we
Mm-hmm.
had that corner of the market, which is
Yep.
pretty cool.
And if you think about what we're talking about with WCW and how we were saying, like, if they're on the Disney lot, they're getting this constant rotation of fans. So they're getting a ton of exposure,
Right.
but it's different people every time. And you might
Right.
not keep those people. But
Right.
like ECW is keeping their fans. Like,
Right.
they're,
Where it's a common, I don't know, debate, I guess, whether it's like so ECW got your like the hardcore fans. They weren't
hmm
necessarily like creating new fans. You know what I mean? Like
I see.
whereas like typically to get down the kind of the like ECW like rabbit hole, you had to already have been a fan of wrestling. You know what I mean? Like you
Okay.
typically people don't start with ECW as far as like wrestling goes, just from a violence perspective, from like
Right.
you know, it's just if it's a smaller promote. It's just typically not where people come across wrestling first,
Right.
unless you're in the Philadelphia area. But
Fully.
um, so they were able to cater to like the hardcore fans, whereas WCW and even WWE, like they're, because they are already on a national platform, they have to cater to a broader audience. They have to
Mm.
be able to show the people that they're like that they're paying to be on this network, that like, oh, like we can draw in people from all walks of life. So they could never do what ECW could do because it was going to automatically alienate your families, your whatever. And those
Right.
really are the people with the spending dollars.
This is true. This is
Um,
true.
so like ECW really catered to that hardcore like section of the fan base, whereas WCW was really reliant on the casual fan,
Mm.
who could be drawn in by like the spectacle. You know what I
hmm
mean? Where like you didn't necessarily need to know everything about the minutia of every wrestler that came out and this and that and the other to be entertained, because you were going to get like the awe of going to like a big show.
hmm
So, yeah, that's always fun to kind of think about.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I guess it just is like pick your flavor, you
Hmm.
know.
Very
But
much so.
ECW is for sure my flavor. Um, but yeah, we get into like the bring your own web BYOW, bring your
Which
own
is
weapons,
crazy.
which is wild. I mean, they're showing clips of like toilet seats, canoe
Can you
oars,
imagine
frying
showing up to a
pans.
wrestling event now with just like weapons?
You can't even have a purse bigger than your hand.
Right.
We literally went to a AEW match and I had a bag and they literally were like, you can't. So we had to
Yeah.
walk all the way back to the car and
Yeah.
put
Oh
like
my God, I
my
forgot about that.
bag. Yeah, like
Right.
in the car. And that was a wrestling match. Like, you know what I mean? And we
Yeah.
were going, I don't even we were at the Prudential Center, I think. But
Right. Hmm.
you can't even bring a bag in, let
Right.
alone a toilet seat, a frying pan, a cane,
Right.
anything. Like, it's so crazy. But also like not sure what type of security is going on at the bingo hall. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Correct.
who's really
And this is
keeping
also
track
the 90s. It was like the Wild
fully?
Wild West. There
So
was
different.
not a
Yeah.
care in the world, really. So,
Yeah. But Yeah, I think Tommy Dreamer is like, I mean, it became a part of the thing where like no matter what they brought, we would use it. Like
Right.
we felt an obligation to use whatever we could pick out of the audience. There were
Mm-hmm.
signs, there were whatever. I also wrote down one of my favorite signs was that I saw at the crowd was pay per sabu.
Oh
And they
yeah.
like instead of pay-per-view, it was pay
Hmm.
per sabu, which love.
Love that.
But Bam Bam Bigelow, someone tells a story about Bam Bam Bigelow taking Spike Dudley.
Hmm.
This, first of all, just in a feat of itself,
Oh,
Bam
fun
Bam Bigelow
fact for you.
throwing him over. Yes, go ahead.
Bam Bam's from Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Work. Okay. Love.
So
Love that.
yeah, you want to know his nickname?
Yes.
The Beast from the East. Amazing. Amazing.
Again, this whole thing was like East Coast for life, girl. Like this
Hmm.
is I just it makes you just like love
I
it.
get
And I
it.
can't imagine being from Philly and watching this. I
Right.
would be like feral, like the
I get.
energy coursing through my veins. Again, I'm levitating. Um,
Oh, but yeah,
but
so Bam
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 throws
Bigelow,
Spike
yes,
into the
in
crowd.
and the crowd catches him instead of like parting like the Red Sea and letting him hit the concrete, which was almost what you would expect because they like blood, they like gore, they want to see people like really
Get hurt,
suffer
yeah.
for their art, so to speak. They catch him and hoist him up and literally crowd surf him through the whole
Arena.
like arena.
Amazing. That's
Amazing.
spectacular.
And I
That's
can't imagine being Spike Dudley and being like, whoa, like they caught me like bracing to be literally thrown into chairs and bodies and whatever and getting
mhm.
caught and hoisted up and just crowd surfed. I can't imagine like the,
Amazing. What a badass like
oh my
moment that
God.
must have been.
That is so crazy. So crazy, amazing. And also just objectively, Bam Bam Bigelow, like just pressing him and throwing him that far
It's crazy.
is
It's
ludicrous.
bonkers.
Ludicrous over from the middle of the ring over the top rope past the like
The
space
guardrail like
between
into the
whatever
crowd. Like
into like the second row. It's so easily just whoosh, that's where that goes.
right. Crazy.
Crazy. I too would have caught him. I would have been like, oh my God, like
No,
just
literally.
wild, just so amazing. But Paul's like, the audience was the story. They were what made us different. I mean, duh. So next we meet Raven,
Yeah.
girl. So Paul's like, I loved the Raven character. The Raven he's very much like Edgar Allan Poe in this thing where he's
Very
like the
tortured
Raven.
artists out here.
Yes, fully. He's like the Raven character motivated me.
No,
Um
literally.
He's so again, it's that passion where he just like it literally feels like he is plugged into the ECW machine and if like he doesn't generate enough energy, like you know what I mean? Like
Right.
he's like on
It'll
the bike or something and
mm-hmm.
he's like the
No,
Raven motivated me
no, literally.
to
And
be
I
yeah.
loved it. And Raven was such a like because he's such just like a cult leader is essentially the gist. Like that is Raven. Like
Yeah. I mean, it's so good. And like he basically said he could do anything I imagined and anything I had like I had a performer that would grasp it, embrace it, have a passion for it, the likes of which I'd never seen before and may never see again,
that's crazy.
which is high praise,
Mm-hmm.
insane praise. This
Right.
is like Paul Heyman, who is working with some of the most crazy impassioned people in the
Ever.
business
Yeah.
ever, and he's like, I may never see the likes of that ever again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you
Girl.
just find somebody that can like take the idea you have in your head and just like absolutely like knock it out of the park, like
Mhm.
how
I
often
can't.
does that happen? Like, and does it the way like you have it in your head? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I that's the dream. That's the
mm-hmm.
dream.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of dreams, Tommy Dreamer is like the feud between Tommy Dreamer and Raven was probably one of the best in ECW for the fact that I never beat him.
Right.
Again, it's that little like that flavor of like Mikey Whipwreck doesn't have an offensive move. It's like that little detail that ends up being the biggest detail that's so crazy. They feuded for 3 years and
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Dreamer never once beat Raven.
Right. Never picked up the win.
And I guess like the gimmick, which I also love because this feels so real life, is that Tommy was like supposed to be this like high school jock who like, you know, got along with
Mhm.
everybody except Raven, who is like the outcast, the
Mhm.
whatever, and he comes to ECW to get his revenge on Tommy Dreamer. And he
Right.
brings with him Miss Beulah.
Right.
Miss Beulah, I think it's like McGillicuddy. Yes,
Yep.
Miss Beulah McGillicuddy, who it was like, this is a quote, was the fat girl in
Right.
camp and had like a thing for Tommy Dreamer, and he obviously rebuked her or rebuffed her.
Right.
And but Raven brings her to ECW and she's like this hot young thing and she's now a Playboy playmate and she also wants her revenge. So Beulah was like the jilted love interest
Mhm.
from camp B and the D,
Right.
and Raven was like the, you know, the
The
outcast in
social
high school,
outcast,
and they
yeah.
team up to like come back and get their, you know, their licks in on Tommy
Very
Dreamer.
John Tucker Must Die. I don't know why, but
Yes,
this
it is though. It fully is, which is one of the my favorite movies ever because it's just so good.
same, same,
It's
same,
so
same.
so silly, but very that. And girl, at one point, I literally wrote, "Mama, he pile drives Beulah."
Mhm.
He pile drives Beulah. She's in like a black thong and a tiny schoolgirl skirt. She gets flipped upside down. The whole
And just
crowd,
dropped on her head.
yeah, bah,
That's what I'm
just
saying.
da, dropped. I can't. This
It
girl,
was
like,
amazing. It was
they
absolutely amazing.
the things they do are so crazy. But they go through this whole thing. They're feuding, they're feuding, they're feuding. He pile drives Beulah, and then Paul says that Tommy had never truly been accepted by the audience. But then I guess, like, I don't know if he finally beats Raven or he just is like gets the one up on them after he like pile drives Beulah or whatever, what have you. But Tommy like stands back and like does the Raven pose, which is like this
Mhm.
thing where he's like,
Mhm.
and suddenly the crowd is like screaming, freaking out, and he says they finally like took him in.
Yeah, they accepted
Crazy.
him. Yeah.
Accepted him. Tommy says that Paul gave him and Raven a lot of creative freedom, which was a blessing. Paul would ask, "What do you want to do with your character?"
Right.
And they said it was amazing because then they could really get creative. And I think then you have like stake in your game. Like
Right.
you're not like it's your body on the line and it's your character and it's your whatever, but then like you might be getting things from like up top where it's like you're gonna do this week.
Right.
But if Paul's like, "What do you want to do?"
Right.
Like, what do I want to do?
You're automatically more invested as the
Yeah, for sure. It just like makes sense. Um, this again, so it gets into again like another flavor of like how Paul is just so honest. So Taz talks about how he and Sabu at one point became partners, but in real life they could not stand each other.
No, they did. Yeah, they could not get along.
Love.
Could not
I
get along.
love that when that happens. Like when you
Mhm.
on screen, they're like, yeah, woohoo, we're partners, and they just like hate each other's guts. So at one point, I guess Sabu gets an offer to do more stuff in Japan and just dipsy doodles. He's like, bye, girl. He was supposed to do like some sort of big show and he just does not show up.
Right.
And so Paul comes out, gets on the mic, and is like, hi, yeah. So I fired Sabu
Fully.
because he was supposed to come out here and give you a show. You guys who made him famous, who gave him his career, decided he didn't want to show up for work today. So you'll never see him again. And I really apologize. Or like whatever he said.
Right.
But
Right.
it was
He
so crazy.
he goes out to the ring with Taz and publicly fires Sabu.
Hmm.
Basically, he like again, this is him being like, when shit comes up, he's gonna go to the ring and handle it. So he goes to the ring and is just like, he's basically just like, he made a commitment to me and couldn't be bothered to even give me a phone call to tell me that he wasn't going to be here. He had, after he had promised me like not 2 days ago that like he would be here and make his commitments. And like since he like has decided that like he doesn't want to do that, like we're done here. Like, and you're just like, that's crazy. Like that's bonkers.
Crazy.
But also it's like, what would you have him do? Like
Yeah,
really?
like just like be like, well, just kidding. We have somebody else.
Right.
Like,
But
which,
that's what other companies do.
yes.
That's not he wanted to be a different company. So
Yep. Yep. And I love that. Love it so much. But this is so funny. Tommy goes, Paul never lied to the fans. He lied to the wrestlers, but he never lied to the fans,
Right.
which is, I'm sure, telling of things to come,
Right.
which is
Right.
great. Um, so then we get into how Taz breaks his neck in a match,
Hmm.
which, by the way, Flash Funk, but he's, what is it, two-tone Scorpio?
Too cool, Scorpio.
Too cool Scorpio,
Hmm.
which I'm not gonna lie, I love that way
Better.
better than Flash
Then
Funk.
flat.
Oh
No,
my
I agree.
God.
That's what I said when he came over. I was like, I like his gimmick better in ECW than I like this.
And now that I've seen it, I'm
It's
like,
hard to unsee, isn't it?
why is he Flash Funk? It's so stupid. Sorry,
Because
that's aggressive,
no,
but it
no,
is. I hate
no.
it now.
Well, yeah, because he goes from like this like cool, badass, like super acrobatic like athlete to like Xenon Girl 21st Century in like 2.5 seconds, just changing companies. You know what I
And
mean?
listen, I love Xenon.
No, don't get
Love.
me wrong, but like
But
it has to fit.
again, I was watching clips of us today, and at the one point I sent it to you, where you describe him as the red and yellow starburst had a baby with Hermes from Greek mythology. And like that is true.
No, yeah,
And I
it's
hate it
hmm
because it distracts from the fact that he's so amazing. He's
right,
such an amazing athlete. Like the intro, the gimmick, the whole thing. And like, listen, do I love the Funkettes? Yes, we know this. But like,
right,
now that I've seen Too Cool Scorpio,
right,
what do what
right.
I hate it. I hate
Hmm.
it so much now. And I
Right.
already did not really
Because
like
you
it,
know
but
how
now I
cool it
really
could
hate it.
be. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
And how amazing he is. Again, whatever. That's a whole other thing. But
I get it. No,
uh,
yeah, fully.
um love this because Taz says he was out for about 9 months and Paul paid him for every week of their agreement and it was based on a handshake. He goes, I didn't have a contract. I had nothing written down. It was literally, and again, Taz, I would love to know where Taz is from because he
New
goes,
York.
work. That makes so much sense. He goes, I didn't even have a contract with the guy. All I had is a handshake. And he
Yeah.
honored that agreement and something I'll never forget. And I was like,
I feel like I don't know if he's Brooklyn or Queens. I
I
don't know.
mean,
He's
I
one.
was like, he's got to be from one of the boroughs.
I don't want to say the wrong one because I know how that goes.
The beef will be beefing.
Yeah, the yeah. I'm not trying to open up the five borough debate.
Yeah, no, not I. But you could tell he's a New Yorker. And again, this especially this moment, again, that East Coast thing where it's like just a handshake. Because a handshake here, law,
Correct.
law. You shake my hand
You look
and
me
you
in the
mess
eyes
up,
and you shake my hand, like you're dead.
dead.
And you mess that up, you're dead. You're
You
dead.
dead meat. You dead meat.
But
And I don't want to
why even
roasting on
go
a spit.
don't go through the rigmarole of coming over here and putting your hand in mine, like acting like we have done something here. If you're gonna go out there and just do the opposite. I was like, no. That is the quickest way
Boop,
to be done.
done. The rage I just felt in my body for a completely hypothetical situation is crazy.
Oh,
Like I
amen.
literally just like handshake is law. And literally Ted's like, I just had a handshake with the guy, no contract, whatever, and
Right.
he honored it.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Full stop.
Right.
Love to see it.
Was
And he says Paul was loyal to the crew, and the crew remained loyal to Paul.
which again, in my mind is just is management 101, but
But
like
beep beep,
but again, a foreign concept back in the day. So
which is wild. And again,
mhm.
like just the proof is in the pudding, and like the one and the one equals two,
Right.
and the yeah. But Paul, I love him because he's also so overdramatic. Goes, ECW was the first victim of the Monday Night War.
I mean, yeah, you're not
He's
wrong.
not wrong though. He's not wrong. He just has a way of saying things. The
No, he
first
does.
victim. He was like, we were the first to fall in the war
Right.
of the Monday nights. Um, he goes, WCW stole Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, and Dean Malenko all in one swoop. That was in August of 1995.
Hmm.
So, this is when it gets into like the three perspectives. So
Right.
all is like stolen goods, stolen valor, stolen everything. Like he's so livid. And then
Correct.
here's Eric Bischoff, and he goes, one man's raid is another man's acquisition. We never raided anybody. They probably weren't getting paid enough and decided to come where the money was, basically,
Yeah.
which
Which
is what Eric would say.
Right, 100%.
how he would see it.
It is just the most Eric thing to say. And he's like, did Vince McMahon raid the territories when like I was like,
Yes.
yes, yeah, yes. If you
Hmm.
talk to anybody that was at the territories during that time, they will tell you that they had big beef with Vince McMahon because he took all of their talent.
And
It's like,
even Vince admits it.
yeah, he
Vince
was,
is like, we put Paul on the payroll because we felt so bad for all of the talent we're stealing from him. That's literally what he says.
yeah. Hmm.
Which was great. The juxtaposition between Eric and Vince, where Vince is like, no, like we felt really bad because we were literally thieving ECW, so we decided to give Paul a little money as compensation.
No,
And meanwhile,
fully.
Eric's like, I've never seen that man in my life.
No, oh, Paul is
I
so real.
I know.
He just goes when it go. First of all, it cuts like immediately from the Eric Bischoff like quote. It cuts to
To
Paul, and
Paul.
he's like Eric Bischoff is full of shit, and then and you're just like, oh, okay, and then he goes, he's like he stole them, and then he
Mm,
stole the cruiserweights, and he's like he goes, it was smart of him to do it. It was an intelligent business move. I take umbrage with the fact that he just doesn't say, yeah, I took that.
yep.
Yeah, it's like just admit it. Like if you did it, just say like if you've done it, like be about it. Like just say
Uh,
that that's what you've done. Like
and again, that's what Paul's saying. He's like, because that's what he is. If you're gonna be about it, be about it.
right.
And so, and
He's
at
like
this point,
he's like I respect it. Like from a business standpoint, like he would probably do the same thing if he was in had the funds that Eric had. Like it's
yep.
not like it's the it is the disrespect shown to ECW that like they couldn't possibly have something of value.
Mm-hmm.
So like we're just gonna say like we just like, got them like out of the blue, like they weren't working somewhere else, and like
Yeah.
that's the thing where Paul's like just say that that's what it was, like call it a spade, like whatever this like weird sugarcoating thing is just like it's fake and it's weird and like no one really believes
And
you.
I don't like it. Yeah,
Right,
and again, two things. It's like one, it's like who are you defending at this point? Like
right,
what does it matter if you stole them? It's already over. Like you know what I mean? Like it's
right,
like it doesn't matter. Like so
right,
just say what you say that you did it. Like it's you're
right.
not defending anybody at this point. But then also um Paul's literally saying like I don't hate the player. I don't hate the player, hate the game. And I'm saying like just admit you're playing the game because that's what I'm saying. Like
Right.
that's the business. I'm saying I would have done it. Like I don't hate you. Now I hate you though because you're trying to tell me that you're not like
You're not
actually
playing the game.
yes, and
Like
we
no,
all
I
are.
was like you're fully playing and you're trying to act like you're just like a third party observer and you're not. Like that's
Yeah,
weird.
super weird. Like you're not above us. You're not above us. You literally put WCW on Monday night to compete with Vince McMahon. So like don't even try me. Like you're playing the game the most out of anybody here.
Right.
So but he like Paul is like basically Eric needed the talent to compete with Vince for the Monday Night Wars and took them from ECW because he
Correct.
just didn't have the muscle. And it's funny, Vince literally says Eric would take talent and gleefully not give Paul anything. Like it made him happy to like
Happy to do it.
withhold. Yeah.
Right.
Um, so then this is great. Again, Paul always thinking. This is
Mm-hmm.
when Paul calls in Conan, Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, and then I can't Juventud,
Juventud Guerrera.
Juventud. So he gets
It's like
Psychosis, Juventud.
youngster.
Okay. Because I know like whatever. We don't have to
Joven
get in,
is
yes, we don't
young.
have to get into what Spanish I know. But
Yeah. Yeah.
um Juventud Guerrero, and decides to bring Lucha Libre cruiserweights in an extreme style to the US and give them a platform. He's like, all right, you want to take my wrestlers? I'm gonna just bring in something you haven't even considered
Which
bringing.
is, and I'm telling you, those like early like lucha libre style like they're responsible for bringing Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio is like
Is
is one of the most proficient. First of all, he's like as far as like the cruiserweights go, he is the best to ever do it. And ask anybody the things that he could do throughout the like his entire career, insane. Like he would just like moves that people have never seen before, combinations of things that you didn't even think were physically possible to achieve. Like this man was spectacular. And Paul was such a like he was so good at like finding those people and like bringing them in and like offering the opportunity, because we know like Rey Mysterio is a Hall of Famer today.
Mm-hmm.
Like so much so like his son is wrestling currently. Like
Mm-hmm.
like Rey Mysterio's life gets changed because he comes through ECW.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, imagine like you're trying to like work your way like out of like Mexico, and you finally like get this opportunity to come work, and like it puts you on the same, like puts you on that map. And like the thing is like Paul, like he either like elevated them like through ECW or elevated them like enough that they got the attention of one of the other companies. So like
Mm-hmm.
either way, like Paul was just in the business of like making everybody around him better, which
Mm-hmm.
is very, very good. Like that's the position you want to be in if you're trying to like you know, put food on the table for everybody, is that
Yeah.
you
He's
make
like, everybody
everybody
eats.
around you better. Yeah, exactly.
Everybody eats.
Everybody eats.
Love. Okay, wait. Can I ask you a question because I am hashtag new wrestling?
Yes.
What is a cruiserweight?
Cruiserweight. So it's essentially just like a like there's the heavyweight like champion. It's
Oh,
cruiserweight is just like the light heavyweight. Like
okay, work. Got it.
they cruiser, they just like named it that because it sounds probably cooler.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Love that. And then also my other question is, I'm pretty sure I know who it is, but who is Rey Mysterio's son?
Dominic Mysterio.
Yes.
He's
Okay.
the one that's like, I don't know if you know Rhea Ripley. She's all over the
Yes.
internet. Like
Yep. Yep.
they're like a little combo right now.
Yeah. 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 Um. Yeah. I obviously last name Mysterio, but always love to double check.
I got you. I got you.
But Rey Mysterio also, I'm gonna be inappropriate, even with the mask on, gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Most beautiful lips I've
Short
ever
king.
seen.
Hmm.
Sorry. Anyway, like if you can just like even with the mask, I'm just like amazing.
LOL.
Good for you. Good for
Hmm.
you. Good for your parents. Good for everything about that.
Right, right, right.
Um, Rey Mysterio says ECW was the father of Rey Mysterio as far as bringing me to the United States for the first time, and I will always be grateful for that. Um, and they would like take the fight out into the streets, like they were jumping off of people's cars, like fans
Hmm.
cars. Paul literally goes, if my father wasn't a lawyer, I could never have pulled off ECW. I got sued more times than Martha Stewart.
So funny. I love that man. I love that man
I love
so much.
Paul. I love Paul so much.
He's so real. It's so real for that. Like
It's
he's literally
so
just
real
like,
for
if
that.
my like literally like if I wasn't a nepotism baby, like there was no way.
I was gonna say, when you're a nepo baby and you admit it, he's like, listen, my dad had the juice to back me up in the lawsuit thing, so I was like, I'm gonna bring as many lawsuits as possible to my
Right.
plate and keep my dad busy.
Right.
Like,
That's what I'm saying. Everybody
work.
eats.
Everybody eats. Everybody eats. Oh, I love Paul so much. It's so good. Now, girl, we get into young Steve Austin.
So great. So great.
I have been waiting for this so much because obviously Steve Austin is one of those people, when you ask someone who knows nothing about wrestling, that's a name you will conjure up.
Right.
Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Undertaker, Ric Flair,
The
like
Rock. Yeah.
the Rock, like these are the names that you conjure up. So it's like
Hmm.
I wanted to know so much more about Steve Austin, especially about his hair. I just had curiosities, feelings, all types of things.
So good.
So we get this close up, just like almost vignetted, like framed face of Stone Cold Steve Austin as a youngin, sort of. I mean, as we know him now, but he literally says, I'm gonna be the superstar that I always knew I could be because there's no one in ECW that can stop me.
Hmm.
And we talked about this briefly when we met Stone Cold in our other show,
Hmm.
and how you're like, Stone Cold had this thing where he was almost like jilted because no one believed he could make it on like just who he was. And then
Right.
he ends up just proving everyone wrong.
Correct.
And this is kind of like the first step
This is
on that
really
journey.
the like, so the character that we know as like Stone Cold Steve Austin, or that has been presented to us like in this show, really gets like honed here. Because this is the final stop before he goes over to the WWE.
This is
So
like the womb space for Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then he's
yes,
like
births like,
into, oh,
so like it very like very much so like Paul says like he was his manager in ECW,
mm-hmm.
and they basically had both gotten the axe at some point or another. So
Yeah.
uh, whatchamacallit, Steve Austin gets fired like over the phone because he was injured at the time.
Disgusting. Disgusting.
Yeah, Eric Bischoff's not known for his
Foul. Bedside manner.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say ethical business practices, but like,
Better,
so
better, clear.
so and Paul was just like, I was just lucky. I was the first one to call him. I just like, you know what I mean? Like how, what great timing. Like,
So good. When I literally put his Stone Cold Steve Austin impersonation took me out. I was dead when Paul was like,
oh,
I called Steve and I go, hey Steve, like, what are you doing? He's like, I don't know. Those fucking assholes fired me. Like,
yeah.
well, what are you gonna do? And he's like, I'm gonna drink beer. Like he literally just like,
He's like, you want to talk about it? He's like, yeah. Like, and he's
this
like,
is
you want to
great too.
talk
He
about
goes,
it on air? He's like, what do you mean? Like, how do you gotta do that? He's like, I've got a TV show. You've got a grievance. Like come on
let's come
out.
up here and air it out. I
So good.
literally all caps, I just wrote, I'm dead. Because it
Mm-hmm.
was so fun. He's like, I got a TV show. You got a grievance. Why don't you come say it on a mic on
Right.
television?
So good.
Amazing and
And he did.
genius.
And
And
he
boy, did he do that.
right. Oh,
Love him.
he did like all of these like impersonations of like Hulk
Hulk
Hogan.
Hogan took me out.
He brought
Took
he had like a whole segment. It was called Monday NyQuil.
love.
So funny instead of like Monday Nitro. Like, oh, he's just so funny. And you like really start seeing like just a little like just the attitude that becomes Stone Cold like through this time. Like you get that like bottom line, like you
Yeah.
hear it in these promos. Like this is Stone Cold becoming Stone Cold. And like what a like great time for the fans to be able to like see that, like
Yep.
to like really see somebody like step into their own like 2 feet and be like, oh, I was like, whatever I was doing was clearly like not working. I'm just gonna do what I want to do, and you'll come to me. Is essentially like the vibe that he like steps into, which is just like so. It's such a cool thing to be able to like behold, knowing what we know now and who he is.
Yep.
Like so cool.
So great. And he just like he really lets loose. Like you said, like Monday NyQuil with the Eric Bischoff wig, like is just it just took me somewhere. It's just so
Mm-hmm.
good. The Hulk Hogan impersonation with like the permanent marker that just says like Hollywood on like a neon shirt. So funny. Like it like Tommy Dreamer's like he just gave Paul gave him a mic and just said like here talk and he cut some of the funniest, greatest interviews of all time because he was pissed.
Right.
Because he was pissed and he just like had nothing to lose and he just like let it all go. There's even one where he's like begging Eric to put him back in the WCW because he just like doesn't have what it takes to compete with ECW, like to
Mm,
compete in ECW, which
right.
is a great way of like saying like
Boosting the
ECW, yes, boosting ECW, like they're so hardcore. Like I just please take me back. I can't even wrestle
right.
here. It's so crazy. Like I love
Love
that.
that.
And they do this thing where Paul wanted Steve to be champion, and Steve is like, no, I'm gonna lose, but I'm gonna say, like, I got this close,
Right.
and now it makes me want it even more. And
Hmm.
like, Paul was like, he was just a genius. He understood business, he understood what people wanted to see, and like what would get people so invested in it.
He
And it
gets
was
that
that.
like it is just as much the chase as it
Mm.
is the moment that you like get the payoff.
Oh,
and
it's so
and
true.
like the more you can get people invested in the chase, the bigger the payoff at the end. Like
Yes.
and you can really see that where we're at now, like in the WWE, where it's just like we are seeing the chase of Steve Austin. Like this is him
Yes.
being like,
Oh, that's so
"Oh, you don't
true.
want me to succeed? Like you don't want me to do like what I'm doing? Like you don't like when I like interfere? You don't like that I'm just going to take what I want?" Like,
Hmm.
"Okay, this is the chase." Like we are seeing like his wrestling mind like really at work now, because now it's like, it's teamed up with Vince, so there's a, you got to play that game. But
Right.
you really understand that like he gets that like to get the fans invested in like him, sometimes you have to take the smaller L to get the bigger W down the line.
So
Because it's all
true.
part of the story. And like again, that's just your basic storytelling principles. Like like main character, like conflict, 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 big conflict, quick resolution. Like
Yep.
he gets it. Like, and it is just so, I guess, refreshing at this time to see somebody who really understands that full like storytelling.
Yes.
And like being able to like apply it to ECW was such a like coup for them.
Yeah. I mean, it was thrilling just hearing you talk about it. So like
Amen.
witnessing the story, like I was just like, so witnessing the story, like I can't just even that taste where it's like, because even I think about right now, like where we're at in the other show, like Undertaker, and
Hmm.
like how he still hasn't put the pause on Paul Bearer. And like
Right.
the day that happens is just, I will be so
Right.
feral. And
Hmm.
like now, spoiler alert, but like a 30-year-old T, the Undertaker is the WWE champion. He just
Hmm.
got the title belt. And like that's thrilling in and of itself, but I still want to see him get his licks on Paul Bearer. Like I still feel
Right.
it. It's still simmering in the back, and I love that. And it's the
Hmm.
same kind of storytelling where it's like there's layers, there's losses, there's you just want to see them win, but also you understand the build. Like exactly. It's
Right.
just it's so good. Um, Ron Buffon says, I always got the sense that something was special with Steve, and I also got the same feeling with Mick Foley. They were just brilliant.
Hmm.
So, um, Paul says, like, I think that, like, because Mick Foley cuts all these, like, anti-hardcore promos, like, where he's, like, just doing this, I don't know, like,
He's essentially calling out the fans for being like too bloodthirsty and wanting too
yes,
much from them, and like
yes,
it's never enough. What am I supposed to give to you? Like what like he said something about like the same people that like cheer for you or whatever wouldn't like piss on you if you were on fire, like where
yes,
yeah, where it's just like you are asking so much of us that like, and that's what the promo was like built off of.
which
this
is
like
great.
this is like at what point is enough? Like how much of my body and being like do you need to be satisfied?
Yeah, because
um
he's lost teeth. He's lost his ear at this point.
right.
He's broken every bone you can think of.
It's just like brilliant promos, and it's like really the first time like you really get somebody like directly addressing like the fans for their like behavior.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And that behavior, it's risky and it pays off because they're literally talking about how the ECW fans are what makes ECW, and now you're calling out those fans. But it works because it's like you've been honest with them this whole time,
Right.
so you have to be able to take the honesty that you want. Like,
Right.
so if we're going to be honest, we have to talk about you and how,
Right.
like, you are asking a lot. And I feel like those fans, because they have so much respect for the business and so much respect for, like, themselves as
And a
fans,
lot
they're
more
going to take it.
know-how. Yeah, and a lot
Yes,
more
they're gonna be like,
know-how then.
oh, like
Right.
they're gonna take it on the chest and be like,
Hmm.
oh, they're not gonna be offended by, like, they might initially, because like again, that's what creates the interest, the buzz, the
Right.
feverishness of it. But it's like the perfect fan base to do it too, because they'll take it on the chin and be like, oh man, like
Right.
thanks for calling me out. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like
Right.
it just worked. It was perfect. And
Hmm.
literally Mick Foley's like, yeah, he gave me the mic and let me go. Let me just get out all the frustrations that I had, and like th- that's it. Like he just
Right.
let me do it, which is
Hmm.
crazy. And like every person that talks about him just says he's like just a larger than life person. He just like is unbeatable in terms of
Hmm.
wrestling. The promos he would cut, he just was like
Right.
incredible. So then we get the reintroduction of Taz, who had left with the broken neck as the Tazomaniac. And now, after all these months of coming back, he said he was training and his neck was feeling better. And he just had this like different energy about him. And he was like, you know what? I need to come back with something new, something fresh. Like, I need to be completely reinvented.
Hmm.
And this is where Taz is born. No longer Tazmaniac, he's Taz. And the way they reintroduce him is so incredible. Basically, they had Joey Styles was doing the play-by-plays for the match. And they had this other person like also doing play-by-plays, but you never saw who it was. And then at the end, he's Joey Styles is like, yeah, like, there was somebody else on commentary with me tonight, and you may not like recognize the voice, but you know who he is. And like the camera
Hmm.
just like pans back, and Taz is just standing there like in like the greatest shape of his life, just mean and whatever. And he goes,
Hmm.
"It's Taz." Like, and it's just
Right.
like
Love
that
it.
that little smoke and mirrors and like that little bit of like tease, whatever, give and take is just so good. Like the way that they did that kind of like revealing storytelling,
Mm.
whatever, is so simple and so effective and amazing. Because you're like, who's that on commentary? Like, who
Right.
is
And
that?
also
And
very like a very much like a foreshadowing moment for the what would be the rest of Taz's career, because he is a commentator like to this day. Like he is just still he is as good on the mic as he's ever been. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's cool. It was a different facet to Taz that the audience hasn't seen, because up to that point he's just like the Tasmaniac. So he's just like a, you know, like there wasn't a whole lot to him like verbally. So to
Yep.
like have him like be the commentator of an entire like episode really like put his verbal skills like into the minds of fans. Like,
Love
oh,
it.
he can do that. Like, got it. Cool.
Yeah. And again, it's Paul being like, everybody eats.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're gonna highlight everybody's every type of skill, like
Right.
whatever it is. And
Mm-hmm.
like sometimes maybe it was like need based, like we need somebody to do that. So we're gonna like put you in that situation. But other times it's like, yeah, like you're good at this and like I'm gonna let you do it, and that's
Right.
gonna be your reintroduction. And I just think
Mm-hmm.
that's great. Now I'm so excited because now we're gonna get into like some of the gimmicks they ran or the storylines they did. Girl, the
Yes.
way in my empty apartment I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, like you don't understand. My neighbors probably thought I was getting murdered. I don't even know because some
Right.
of these literally
Uh, are
made me.
crazy.
It's again, it's the best soap opera I've never watched. Like it's just so
Right.
amazing.
Right.
So the first thing they do is they talk about the Sandman and Raven and Sandman's son.
Right.
So Raven is kind of doing like a cult thing, like he's the cult leader. Ba ba ba. He's
Mm-hmm.
involved with Sandman's ex-wife Lori Fullington,
Mm-hmm.
who comes with Tyler Fullington, Sandman, her and Sandman's 8-year-old son.
Correct.
And they do this thing where basically like Tyler like forgoes the father in favor of Raven and is like, I love you more than my own daddy, like to Raven. Like
Right. It's
basically
a whole
abandon
thing. Yeah.
it's a whole thing. And like Sandman is like genuinely weeping, breaking down on TV. And Paul's like, I mean, like you couldn't look away. It was like the most emotionally wrecking story we'd ever done. Like it
Right.
just gutted you.
Right, because the like up to that point, like the Sandman was like just this like
A
straight up
dude.
unmitigated badass. Like there was no feeling to him. So
Yeah.
like it was just like such a like stark contrast that people were like, oh, what's going on there? Like
He's a
interesting.
father,
Right.
which is crazy. Because I think again, it plays on that human emotions of like, yeah, this is the guy who's like coming out here and chugging beers and beating people up and like blah blah blah. And
Mhm.
you're like, oh, he's like somebody's father. And you
Right.
want to know what sells other than sex? Daddy issues.
You're not wrong.
Girl.
You are not
Girl.
wrong.
You're watching the 8-year-old and their father is like this crazy borderline drunk
Mm-hmm.
smoking cigarettes on TV, and you're like, that might remind me of my old man. Like, you know what I
Right.
mean? It like really triggers people. It triggers
Mm-hmm.
people, and you're like, oh me, I don't know. Like it's just this whole crazy thing. And literally there's this like promo where Raven is like sitting behind Tyler and he's like, hey kid, you know the divorce was your daddy's fault, don't you? And this killed me. The kid's like, I know. And he does
And
this,
just does the pose. So
which
good.
like is just amazing. So then at one point Tyler, the fact that they got this 8-year-old, by the way, in on this thing, so this kid
Amazing.
deserves
Amazing.
an award or something, which, by the way, I looked him up where he is now. He's just like thriving, doing his own thing. Google says he's a professional wrestler, but I couldn't find where or when or what his
Right.
name is or what he does, but he's just
He's
living a
out here living
life,
his life. Okay.
living a life. He's like 34 years old or something
No
now.
way he's like
Where
about our age. That's nuts.
no, he is. He was born, I think, in like 1989
Oh wow.
because he was like 8 years old around the time of the beef, and like
Oh yeah,
that's
that I
yeah,
guess that makes sense. Yeah,
he's like
four
not much
four
older
or
than
five
us.
years older than us. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
really
Hmm.
weird. Either way, there's one more where they have Tyler dress as Sandman, go into the oh my god, go into the ring. Sandman literally, they think they're having this reunion. He embraces him. He's like, oh my god. He's like
Right.
crying. He
Reunited with
thinks
his
they're
son. Yeah.
yes. Sandman steps up. It was literally a play so that Raven could beat the crap out of him with a cane,
So yeah.
which is just so insane. So there's
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the storylines they do. Then they get into the Blue World Order, which takes me out.
Oh my god,
Um,
amazing.
which is the Blue Meanie and Stevie Richards and Nova are the
Hmm.
original Blue World Order. First of all, Stevie Richards is gorgeous.
Right. A babe.
And
Yeah.
love a man that can laugh at himself and takes nothing seriously.
Hmm.
Because also then, he takes everything seriously because he's willing to do whatever.
Right.
So I guess like he and the Blue Meanie were doing a bunch of parodies at this point, and then
Mhm.
he was like, Stevie Richards was like, yeah, I was like legitimately just like, we decided to spoof NWO because it was so big and it was the thing at the time, and we decided to do it, and it just got legs. It just became like
Yeah.
the most popular parody we'd ever done.
Right.
Um,
And you just run with it.
and
Like,
you just run with it. And
hmm
the Blue Meanie as Razor Ramon is
this,
hysterical.
Scott Hall. Yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
Scott Hall,
You
yes.
know, same, whatever. Same, but
Whatever,
different.
whatever.
So good. So good.
Is
I'm the blue guy.
hysterical. I'm the blue. And now I understand when we had the ECW crossover episode at Hammerstein, and they come out and people are geeking out. And I'm like,
Right.
Blue World Order, like I don't get it. Because now that we watch
It is
NWO,
just a
I'm like,
dumb joke
it's
that just
freaking
kept going.
hysterical.
Like,
And
it's so good.
it's great because it's the other side of the same coin in terms of like ECW's, in Paul's words, aura, where it's
Hmm.
like we're so extreme, we're even like going to be extreme like comedy queens almost. Like,
Right.
where it's just like we're just going to make everyone laugh and do something so hysterical but also give you
Hmm.
like what you want to see. Like it's just
Right.
funny. And it's a great way of poking fun at WCW being like, this is literally a joke, which is what we said last week talking about fake Razor and fake Diesel. It's like if you had parodied it,
It would have,
maybe 10 times more successful because it obviously worked at ECW.
right.
So
Like,
like,
yeah, and they did it like in such a way where it's so over the top, where it's just like, obviously, like, these people are not these people. Like, it's
right,
just like, haha.
fully.
But like WWE like tried to like take it so seriously that it was just like it backfired in the way that like it was just like, oh, you're just making the product for WCW more interesting. Like, you were
Right.
actively just like putting eyes towards your opponent instead of doing like getting eyes to you by being like creative or funny or whatever. Like,
Yes.
you're just like giving like the no name like brand of something that you were used to be brand name, like, is
Mm-mm.
essentially what you're doing.
Stupid. Serious
Right.
foot and mouth disease. Like
Right.
serious. Like why? So that's amazing. And then this is probably my favorite storyline I've ever seen in my whole
Oh
life.
my god, yeah, it was wild.
The pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Because it
This
just keeps going. Like, there's
it
just more and more to
just
it.
when I thought it was done,
No.
girl,
I'm telling
I
this
was
feud went
wrong.
on for 3 years. There was a lot going on. There's a lot
I
of
How am I gonna get through this? Okay, basically, so Beulah, who is Raven's girlfriend, or comes through
mm-hmm.
as Raven's girlfriend, reveals she's pregnant. She's like on stage with
Stevie Richards, it
Stevie
looks like.
Richards, and like he's like, "Why are you acting so weird? Like, is it because you're Raven's girl?" And she goes, "No, it's because I'm pregnant." I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, whatever." Raven comes out, starts beating the crap out of Stevie Richards because he thinks that
Stevie's been a little too nice to his
a little too
girl.
nice. There might have been a little too buddy buddy. There might be some questions of the father. Um, Beulah stops him and is like, "No, no, like it's not his." And Raven's like, "What do you mean it's not his? Like what?" And she goes,
It's Tommy's. Ah, I'm screaming, I'm screaming, I'm crying. She got, listen, and like, as like there, go off, Beulah. You get your high school crush. Like, you get your high school crush.
"Hmm,
Absolutely. As somebody who has fulfilled that also, there is nothing quite like it.
girl."
Get your high school crush, girly. Get your high school crush.
Because it's so good because it's basically to Raven is like, "You were just a vehicle for me to get what I actually wanted."
Right.
Ugh, it's so good
Crazy.
because literally, like they went there to quote unquote allegedly
Take
feud,
down
get their
Tommy.
licks back to take down Tommy, and she's taking down Tommy, but not like you think. I
Yo,
really,
yo,
I'm dead. So I'm
so good.
losing my mind. Tommy comes out because, which first of all, Raven puts the paws on Beulah because
Right.
he flips out. So he literally starts choking her.
Right.
Tommy
She's
comes out.
pregnant. That's crazy.
Tommy comes out because he's like, well, Raven's beating up my impregnated secret girlfriend, so I have to go out there and ba ba ba.
Right.
So then they just leave together. Shocking. You think
Hmm.
that's the end? I'm literally like my blood pressure's just receding.
No.
Now they go Then they're going on saying Beulah is cheating on me. Like the
Mhm.
franchise is coming around saying like, "Oh my God, no, no, no! Like you don't even know she's cheating on you." Ba ba ba.
Like, she's not pregnant, like,
She's
this is
not
all a
even
ruse.
pregnant. This is all a ruse, and she's cheating on me with someone else. And Tommy's like, "Okay, whatever. I don't even get. Just tell me who it is." And he goes, "And we were teasing it that it might be someone I'm feuding with. It might actually be Ravens. It might be somebody, but like whoever." And then so I guess the franchise has almost like a companion or a whomever, and her name is Kimona,
Mhm.
and who's just wearing this little gold bikini. She's gorgeous. She's on stage while this whole exchange is happening between Tommy and the franchise. And Tommy's just like, "Who is it? Who is it?" Kimona comes and grabs the mic and goes, "It's me,
Right. Crazy.
girl,
Crazy. 'Cause it
girl."
and the thing is it doesn't even end there. Like, it's not
Nope,
even no, like,
nope,
it's not
nope.
even
And
the
then so now, first ever lesbian storyline in wrestling history. Tommy's like, we were taken off every single TV network we'd ever been on.
right.
Because Beulah comes in, macking on
Macking,
Kimona, macking.
macking,
They
rolling
fall
on the
to the
ground.
ground, rolling around, tongue kissing
Right.
on the crowd, screaming. Everyone's losing their mind. Tommy picks them up, breaks them apart, picks them up, holding them.
By the hair,
Shane,
mind
by
you.
the hair. Shane Douglas is like, "Well, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now?" He looks at both of them. Oh my God. And he goes, "I'll take them both. I'm hardcore."
Right.
And then he's kissing Beulah, then he's kissing Kimona, then he's kissing both of them at the same time. Literally just all three of them. Like Ron at bed in Jersey Shore.
Oh
Dear
my god.
Sammy, when
Wow.
you left bed,
That's amazing. That's amazing. Oh my god.
I
Amazing.
and the crowd
Losing it.
screaming, standing,
Screaming.
fainting,
And the thing that's,
shrieking.
like, crazy is, like, this is how you know that they are marketing to the 18 to 34, like, male demographic, because name a situation where two lesbians are making out and a straight guy comes by and is like, "I'll take them both," and then both of
And they're
them
like,
agree to it. Like, okay, okay. Have you met a lesbian ever?
I like swear to God, that's
That's so
have you
funny.
met a
That's the
lesbian
most
ever?
that's the most unrealistic thing about it.
It's it's 10 p.m. at ECW. Do you know where your lesbians are? Because
So
I don't even
crazy.
that is so real. That is so real. It's like, okay, so that's just that would have never had. That's the most
Right.
unreal thing that's ever happened in ECW.
And it's
Two
just like and
lesbians deciding to be the same
right,
toys for a straight man,
right.
period.
So funny. It's just like,
I'm
of
dead.
course. This is
I'm
like now you like you really see the like who is the target demo like with an angle like that.
I
You really get it.
and then the like I I didn't know where to go from here. I literally had to stop and be like,
I need a breather.
I
I need
need
a
a break.
breather. I get it because that's crazy.
And I can't imagine because I watched that in the 1 minute of storytelling they did in the documentary. I can't
Like
imagine
building
watching
up
this
to that.
play out over years. I think I would have literally had an apoplexy. Like I think I literally would
They
have
did. Like
fainted.
they were losing it.
They were. Oh my God, the
Like,
crowd. The way I would have like grabbed just like someone's shirt next to me and just been like,
no,
just
yeah.
freaked
Honestly,
out.
you're not wrong. You are not
Crazy.
incorrect.
Crazy. So now where do we go from here? Now they get into how like Vince's about how WWE starts to get involved with the ECW. So Vince's curiosity, I guess, has peaked at the King of the Ring they had in Philly when Mabel was crowned King of the Ring and the whole crowd is chanting ECW with great passion and anger at Vince McMahon. Do we know
Amazing.
why? They're like they just because he's in
N-
Philly and like
It's because they're in Philly and like
they
they
just
just want to make it known that ECW is here and
in the
is what
he
they
he
want,
work. Okay.
essentially.
Love that. So Vince was like he dismissed it at first, but it started really making noise. And then Vince was going back to Philly for In Your House Mind Games, which we watched on the other show, and
Yep.
now I'm like, ah. So this is where we get again those like two different flavors. So Paul says ECW is making such waves that it would behoove Vince from a business standpoint to publicly acknowledge them and notice them. And Vince is more like, I mean, why not acknowledge them? They weren't even close to being on our level, so why not like throw them a little bone of recognition, like la la la. Like he's
Right.
very like passe about it. He's just like,
Right. Yeah. I mean, but at the end of the day, it does broaden their audience, like,
of
which is,
course.
Vince is like Vince is an intelligent businessman. Yeah, that's fair. Is an intelligent businessman.
Yeah,
So it's he doesn't do things that aren't going to benefit like his company. So like he's
right.
downplaying the fact that like again, it's that like what Paul said earlier in the documentary is like ECW just doesn't get the like credit for what it like did or like the
Right.
splash that it made. And this is just another one of those scenarios where like like the big bads of the wrestling business are like, like it wasn't like on par with what we were doing, but you know what I mean? Like
Of
there's
course.
always like they give them a little bit of credit, but there's always like a caveat. Like there's always like a
And
like
I yeah. And I think
and
it's because like not because, but like it's one of those things where it's like they did it and created something without any of the resources
right.
that Ted Turner and Vince had.
Hmm.
They did it without any of the resources. Girl, they're in a bingo hall and they created something so crazy. And so like
Hmm.
it almost like hurts to give them credit where it's like you literally had all
All
the
of
money,
this.
all the time, all the people on the team, the
The
budget, the whatever,
resources, yeah.
the all the stuff, and you still couldn't make exactly that happen,
Right.
like that level. And again, it's like what you were saying before, where it's like, there's certain audiences where,
Right. You
but yeah,
but like you at the end of the day, like your job is to like put on the show that people leave like talking about. And like no one can say that
fully.
they weren't doing that in ECW. You know what I mean?
Fully. And
So
again, it's like now it makes when we talked about that episode where Paul says, like, oh, you want to shoot?
yeah.
Woo! Makes that
Because
crazy.
because like if you know that this history is like Paul goes out to the ring and just says whatever. Paul does not care. Paul is
Her.
seasoned in having to tell uh aggressive crowds not great news. So like he's totally fine with like just getting on the mic and just like whatever I need to say, I'm going to say, and it's going to be creative and usually funny. And like you're going to take it, and whatever the response is from everybody else, I said it.
Oh
It's
well.
done. Right. Like
I
it's
am
just
only in
such
charge
a
of what I say, not what how people react to it.
right. He's honestly, that man is such a vibe, like such a like the way that he goes after what he wants is just like such an inspiration. Like it is like how I want to live my life. You know what I mean?
Fully.
Like it
Fully.
just
I hope he
really
feels it.
I
I hope he feels it.
honestly, yeah. So, and it's gonna be
Love.
I literally cannot wait to see this man get inducted into the Hall of Fame in Philly. Like
I'm
it's
gonna
going
cry.
to be crazy. Yeah.
I'm gonna cry a lot.
So is he. So it's fine.
I can't. I can't. I can't watch Paul
He
like,
gets emotion like he has gotten emotional like a few times like let of note.
and I
uh
will cry
right.
watching that.
There is one pay-per-view I want us to watch, which is ECW One Night Stand, which
Yes,
happened
we've talked about this, and I was
in
thinking about it
in
watching this.
2005. They all come back and they do essentially just like an ECW style pay-per-view, like a real ECW style pay-per-view with like the WWE performers that were around back then. So
I'll
and
cry
it's
right
great.
now.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We'll watch it and put out an episode about it at some point. But
I would love, yeah, would
definitely
love,
something.
because I remember us talking about this, and I was like, I even before watching this, I was like, I
Hmm.
need to see that. So
Right.
now watching this, I'm like, I
It's
need
gonna
to
be
see
great.
that with a whole box of tissues and like
Hmm.
a
Oh,
pillow,
oh,
like
we
just
will. Don't worry.
clutched. Okay, work.
Don't worry.
So, we know, as we know, ECW shows up during which I'm pretty sure I know the name of this. It's the Caribbean strap match.
Yes.
Work. Okay, they didn't say it in the episode, and I was like, I'm pretty sure it's called a Caribbean strap match. Work. Caribbean strap match between Justin Hawk Bradshaw and Savio Vega. So that's when Sandman comes through, like, just smashing the beer, doing the thing, and
Hmm.
everyone's like, and they say like they didn't know who knew and who didn't know. No,
Right.
like Taz was like, we never went into the locker room. We kind of just like hung out in the parking lot and like waited to go in. We didn't know what wrestlers knew, what staff knew, like, and we had members of ECW scattered throughout the arena because we weren't sure if like WWE was going to jump us or like retaliate. Like we had no idea
Right.
what was going to happen, which again speaks to the loyalty they have to Paul, because then at one point Taz jumps the barricade with like a sign, and
Mm-hmm.
like the staff there was like, no, 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 like don't do that. And he was like, I was instructed by my boss that if anyone tries to get in your way, get them out of your way. He goes,
Mm-hmm.
so it was a photographer trying to stop me and I shoved him out of the way and essentially broke his shoulder,
Right.
which is
Crazy.
just,
I just love the way he tells it though. He's just like
he's
he goes
laughing.
he's like telling the story about like security. He's like, I told him, it's like, you don't want to do this. Like you don't want to do this.
Right,
Like
because I guess like the one guy said to him like, "No, you don't want to do this. It's not worth it." And I was thinking back to the moment that fan jumped in the ring and got his
mm-hmm.
ish rocked,
Right.
and so the guy's like, "You don't want to do this," and Tad's like, "Actually, you don't want to do this. Like,
Right.
you definitely don't want to do this." And he turns out he didn't, broke his shoulder, and it's funny because Taz like laughs. He's like, "Yeah, broke his shoulder. It's a bummer."
Right.
Like
Right.
so great. Um, Now then they switch to, I think when things start to like the things start to go awry maybe a little bit at ECW. So basically Raven wanted to do this thing where he crucifies Sandman, like literally ties him to a wooden cross and hoists him up on the side of the ring.
And not just that, like actually gave him
Uh,
like a
the
crown.
crown of thorns.
Yeah,
Like really obvious
like
religious
on the nose.
iconography.
Yeah, like
Like not a joke. And I will say I understand the interest in trying to do something like that because like there's two of the most controversial things are sex and religion. You're already doing sex, you're already doing
right.
the violence, the whatever. So like it might make sense for you to like lean towards doing something like that.
Right.
But religion, obviously, as we know, extremely
Really
tricky,
touchy. Yes, very
really
touchy for
touchy.
people.
You never know. You just
Right.
never know how it's gonna go down. And I think nah, not even today. I was gonna say maybe today you could get away with something like that, but no, I don't think so.
Nah, I
Like
don't think so.
not something
Not
this
without like
specific,
backlash. Like it just wouldn't.
severe backlash, and not the backlash I think they're looking for.
Right.
But yeah, so Kurt Angle was there. Um, and he was gonna come and do some stuff with ECW, and he saw that and was like, "Oh, nah,
No. No,
like
no, 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 no.
absolutely not." So he goes right up to Paul and he's like, "Listen, you're gonna pay me what you said you were gonna pay me, and I'm out. Because and if my name is ever associated with this episode, if my face ever appears on any promotion of this episode, like you will be hearing from my attorney. Like, peace out."
Right.
And so what happens is they basically make Raven go out and apologize like
Right.
immediately after it happens. They like take Sandman down and then Raven goes out. And like this is just not even like we're almost breaking the fourth wall because Raven's this like cult character figure, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of aloof, whatever. Like he's just going like quote the Raven nevermore, like blah blah blah. But like
Mm-hmm.
for him to go and be like, I understand I've crossed a boundary and
For
like
some people, yeah.
that's for some people, and like even though he literally is so real, he's like, even though I'm not necessarily like a person who puts stake in religious iconography, a lot of you do, and I have a respect for you even though we don't agree or whatever, and
Right.
like
And it's just
that's
it's
my
like he's like,
bad.
for those that I have like deeply offended, like I apologize. Like he's like,
Yes.
yeah. He's like he at the end of the day, like they're just trying to entertain people, like, and it was more a shock value thing that just didn't land than
Right.
like him out of like I don't think it was him making a statement on religion. I just think
No,
it
fully
was
not.
yeah, I think it was just like a poor choice
Yeah,
of,
and
you
I
know.
and I think too, like if you're going for like the cult angle, again, religion seems like a thing you might like traverse.
Right.
And especially because like we associate, and we don't need to get into like the nitty-gritty, but like we associate crucifixion with Jesus Christ, even though like many other people had been crucified for
Right.
religious beliefs. So it's not necessarily like a,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't
You can't
separate the
separate
two
the
things.
two. Yeah.
Yes, like you cannot separate the two things, especially with the crown of thorns. And it just was like again, it's a shock, like you said, shock value thing that they tried to go for. It didn't land. It like was
And they
perceived
said
as
like
very
it was the
inappropriate.
only time like in the ECW arena where it was just like the crowd was just like silent, like just
Silent.
like didn't know like how to respond. Like, and that's saying something for the crowd that they are, because they
Yes.
always have a response.
Even if they're upset,
Right.
which is crazy. So like even if they're when they're happy, they're screaming, when they're upset, they're screaming, when they're like, but nothing
Is exactly.
bad, really
Right.
bad. So like again, they immediately whatever. So Kurt Angle says that Paul swears he didn't know what was happening. He had no idea. And he goes, and I believed him. But if you're the showrunner and you're saying you don't know what's going on with like your talent, then you're an idiot,
Hmm. Like I
which
can,
is crazy.
right, because like I understand where he's coming from in that like if you're the one person like putting on the show, you might want to know what's
What
in
the
the
show's gonna,
show. Right.
yes,
And
totally.
I get that. And like I fully understand, and I like, from a like wrestler like perspective, I can totally understand just being like, oh, like that this is like a just the wild wild west. Like nobody, like he's in
Nobody's
charge
at the
and
wheel.
doesn't know what's happening. So like
Yes.
why would I like come here and like throw my name in that hat? Like especially if that's the first presentation that he's getting. You know what I mean? Like that's rough.
Yes.
Like
Yes. And again, it's what we talked about with WCW is where it's like there's a point where it's like, okay, I have creative freedom, but at some point it's like when you have creative freedom, sometimes like
you need somebody to check it.
to
Like you need
check it fully because I just feel like there's no way that would have went down if Paul knew about it. Because again, like Kurt Angle's like, I believed he didn't know, but that's the problem in and of itself is that he didn't know.
right.
Like, because that's bad.
Right.
So I think this is like where, like we've said, like creative freedom starts to be like maybe not that much freedom.
Right. Right. Right.
Maybe
Right.
like you can tell me where you want to go, and I'll say if
Hmm.
that's a great idea to go that way or not.
Right.
Like, and then
Exactly.
work from there. But yeah, so this is where we're gonna end it today. We know that was
Correct.
a lot of information,
Yes, yes, yes,
but
yes, yes.
we're gonna end it here today, and next week we're gonna start talking about when ECW starts running pay-per-views and how that goes. So we're gonna get
Hmm.
into that. Well, actually, it won't be next week. So
Oh yeah,
next
so
week,
let's do, yeah.
yes,
So for
2 weeks
you
from now.
guys, as far as just I guess formatting for the next couple of weeks, this episode that you're listening to obviously comes out on Saturday. And so next week we'll run our regular new to wrestling podcast, but we will have a, is that next week? Yes, next week we will have a guest. More
Wow.
information on that. So it'll be our very first guest. Um and then next weekend, since it is going to be WrestleMania weekend and we know you guys are going to be watching a ton of wrestling. Anyway, we did a short episode about the 1997 Slammies. It's half an hour, just a little quick little bite of wrestling. And then the following week we will pick back up with the ECW series. Most likely, because we like to talk, will be 3 parts, might be 2. It all depends on runtime and things of that nature. I also just want to point out that as of today, as of yesterday, when this comes out, we officially hit our birthday, 1 year. And we also hit another kind of landmark on YouTube. We just got our 100th follower, which in the grand
Wow.
scheme of social media, I know is not insane, but I do want to take a moment to just kind of thank you all, because the fact that 100 people anywhere have the gumption to listen to what we want are saying is not lost on me.
No.
So I just want to say thank you. We appreciate that you have come wherever you're coming from to hang out with us for an hour, hour and a half. And we have some exciting things coming. So again, thank you guys so much for checking us out. This has been the New to Wrestling Podcast After Dark, and we will catch you next week.
We'll see you there.
All right. Bye.
Bye.